Across Colorado Springs, the bars are closing up for the night. And at St. Francis Hospital, Sergeant Brian Grady has his hands full.
Go ahead and turn around and put your back up there. Man, we need to get this guy checked in. He's been in a bar fight.
Sergeant Grady is dealing with a person that got into an altercation with a bouncer, ended up getting hurt, and had to be treated at the hospital.
Hey! You gotta help this guy!
What's going on?
There's a guy hurt down by the corner of Rio Grande and Hancock.
These two teenage kids come roaring into the ER saying they've just seen a man stagger down a sidewalk and fall down.
Who's down there? What happened?
We don't know. We were just driving by and we just saw him there.
That takes priority.
Guys, if you stand right there. Dispatch got a report of a man down, possible assault victim, corner of Rio Grande and Hancock. Start a unit in EMS. Ma'am, I'm gonna lock this guy down. I'll be right back.
Minutes later, Officer James Huddleston arrives at a dimly lit street corner not far from the hospital.
And he actually sees an individual laying down on the curb.
Sir, are you okay?
There's an extreme amount of blood surrounding this body.
Sir, can you hear me? Are you okay?
Across town, Lt.Joe Kenda is enjoying some much-needed shut-eye.
For me to get a night's sleep when I was working, I don't remember it ever happening. I was either restless with nightmares or the phone would ring and introduce me to the next nightmare. But on this particular occasion, I was zonked.
Okay.
Here we go again.
All right, let me get you dressed. I'll be right there.
I never liked leaving home at night. You're not supposed to be wandering off somewhere to look at somebody's dead body. But that was the nature of the work.
Morning, sir.
Morning. So what do we got?
One male stab victim, Calvin Blair, 28 years old.
Calvin Blair is from the Chicago area. He moved to Colorado when he was actually assigned to Fort Carson in the military.
He has suffered a minimum of one stab wound to the chest and was pronounced dead on arrival at St. Francis Hospital.
It's pretty late. I don't suppose we have any witnesses.
Well, as a matter of fact, we do.
David Teller and Joseph Holmes, they're both 18 years old, and they were driving home. And they saw this man laying in the street.
Boasted that they were coming home from a movie.
A movie?
That's what they claim.
It's 2:30 in the morning. The last movie show is over at midnight at the latest. So that strikes me as unusual.
Where are they now?
They're both still at the hospital.
They were pretty reluctant to give any further information and really didn't want to stick around. That makes you kind of suspicious.
Hey, Wood, come over here a second. Take it right over to the hospital and talk to you.
I signed Detective Wood to go to the hospital and speak to Mr. Teller and Mr. Holmes.
St. Francis?
Yeah.
I'll let you know when I find out.
Thanks.
And I'm still at the crime scene looking around to see what we can see.
Oh, that's a lot of blood.
When you see that amount of blood at a crime scene, the weapon involved had to strike a major organ. It had to strike an artery.
There does appear to be a bit of a blood trail over here, though.
Let's see where it goes.
I look with a flashlight, and I follow it for quite a ways.
At the end of the blood trail, Kenda discovers another key piece of evidence.
We've got a knife.
A kitchen steak knife covered in blood, obviously the weapon that caused the wound.
Does our victim, Calvin Blair, live anywhere around here?
Not really.
Calvin's driver's license gives an address that's miles away.
No, that's not exactly walking distance.
Now, how did Calvin come to be in this place? The most likely method is by car. So did something go wrong in a car and he was pushed out and wound up in the street and staggered 160 feet until he died?
As Kenda mulls over the notion of a potential carjacking, Detective Steve Wood is at the hospital, attempting to extract information from David Teller and Joseph Holmes.
So you have something to tell me?
I already told you we were at the movies and come back and just saw the guy on the side of the road. That's all there is to it, really.
What movie were you watching that doesn't let out until 2 a.m.? Come on.
Detective Wood's thinking, what's the reason for this nervousness?
What movie was it? Tell me about it. I might want to go see it.
All right, fine. We didn't go see a movie. I told my dad that so he'd get off my back. We actually went to a party and we were just coming home from that.
He indicated they were driving down the road and they saw this person staggering down the street. And all of a sudden, he just fell real hard.
Then we got closer, saw it.
Saw what?
The blood. It was everywhere.
Come on, let's go. Let's get out of here.
We hightailed it out of there and came straight to the hospital.
This is the days before everybody was carrying cell phones. They knew the hospital was close.
I don't understand. Why not help the guy on the ground and bring him here to the hospital?
I don't know, we weren't thinking. It just all happened so fast.
Okay. Would you take a seat? I'll be with you in a moment, but don't go anywhere.
Detective Wood moves on to Joseph Holmes. But after 15 minutes of questioning, he's still getting the same fishy story.
We're sorry, okay? We didn't know what to do.
Would you take a seat? Don't go anywhere. Would Kenda?
Go for Kenda. So what do you hear from our two witnesses?
They basically have the same story.
Maybe it's the truth. Maybe they just had time to sort out the stories, but there's definitely something
up with these two.
10-4, why don't you see if they'll let you look inside their vehicle, see if you find any blood or anything.
All right.
Without.
Hey, Lieutenant. We sent some guys that canvassed the neighborhood, see if we can find you any witnesses.
And?
Well, I think we may have found you somebody.
His name is Alfred Clare, and he lives in a house right on the corner where the blood trail begins.
Some officers are standing by with him in his house up here.
Thank you.
At the home of Alfred Clare, Kenda presses his new witness for more details.
Hey, Mr. Clare, I'm Lieutenant Kenda. You tell me what you saw tonight?
Yes, I was sleeping, and I was awakened by 3 people out on the street, and they were by a car.
And what were they doing?
They were arguing.
How are you doing, bro? I've been stabbed.
Alfred Clare says 2 of the people drove away while the 3rd person staggered down the street.
There are 2 people with Calvin Blair. Well, we happen to have 2 people in our possession. Now that works for the head count, now doesn't it?
Alfred Clare tells Kenda he saw an argument between 3 people outside his home. Then, 2 of them drove away while the 3rd left on foot.
And one of them stumbled away. I think that's the fellow that you all found.
It sounds like it. Did you get a good look at them?
No, not really. It was too dark.
And what about the vehicle?
It was white. That's about it.
Well, I appreciate the help.
That's important. We know we've got 2 people that may be involved in this case, maybe not. Let's find out what kind of car they're driving.
Go for it.
Hey, Steve, just checking to see if you were able to examine the car those kids are driving.
Yeah, it's clean. No blood, no nothing.
My question of Wood is, what color is that car?
What color? It's black. Why?
Well, you can't mistake black for white. That's not the car that Mr. Clare saw. So we have gone from maybe having 2 suspects in our possession to having no idea who did this to Mr. Blair.
All right, you guys are free to go.
We know now their nervousness in trying to talk to us was the fact that they were late for curfew.
Let's get out of here.
With no concrete suspects, Kenda takes a new tack in order to learn a little more about the victim, Calvin Blair.
I asked Wood to meet me at the address that we have for him. Hopefully someone can give us some idea as to where Mr. Blair was this evening before we found him in the street.
Lillian?
Yes?
Do you know Calvin Blair?
Yeah. Calvin's my ex-boyfriend. He used to live here, but we broke up last month.
May we come in?
She obviously knows that this is serious to have policemen in suits knocking on her door at 3:30 in the morning.
I'm very sorry to have to inform you that Calvin was killed earlier tonight.
What happened?
She's upset about the death of Calvin. He's an ex-boyfriend, but she's still concerned about him.
Can you tell us about Calvin?
Calvin was a really good man. Just lived a really tough life. He was an orphan. His brother practically raised him.
When he turned 18, he decided to join the Army, looking for some type of structure in his life.
The Army provides an opportunity for a young man to suddenly gain character, integrity, and a sense of purpose in his life.
He was doing great, but once he got out of the Army, he kind of drifted.
When that structure disappears, over time, all of those good feelings he had about himself begin to fade. And before one knows it,
What's up, man? Hey, what's going on, man?
he is lost once again.
Yeah.
Lillian said as time went on, he drank more and more, and it really interfered with their relationship. She loved him very much, but just couldn't be around him when he was drinking.
It got to the point where I was rarely seeing him. He would go out every night and hang and drink at Cloud 9.
Every police officer in Color Springs knows the Cloud 9 bar. It's a local bar that had a lot of trouble in its day.
Ms. Washington, you've been very helpful. Again, we're very sorry for your loss. We'll let ourselves out.
In relation to the crime scene, the Cloud 9 is less than a mile from that location. Odds are enormous. Whatever happened to Mr. Blair started at the Cloud 9.
Cloud 9's been closed for several hours now. You really believe there's somebody that still be there?
This is the Cloud 9 we're talking about. Somebody will be there. Police, open up! We need to talk.
I don't know what y'all expect to find. It's just me and the bartender here.
That's exactly what I expected to find. Hey, I'm Lieutenant Kenda.
The best sources of information in any bar is the bouncer and the bartender. They all pay attention to what's happening. They know who's trouble and who isn't.
You know this guy?
Yeah, that's Calvin. He was just in here earlier tonight.
Good guy?
Oh, yeah, I love Calvin. I mean, he's got his issues, but he's got a great heart.
She said when he first showed up at the bar,
Hey, pretty good.
she described him as a prince. Everybody loved him. But the more he drank, his attitude changed.
And so as it goes with alcohol, it lessens inhibitions. And he would kind of lose his manners, and then he would behave inappropriately toward women.
It's like Jekyll and Hyde. We have to eject him from time to time. Didn't you just throw him out tonight?
Yep.
You threw him out of the bar?
Yep, earlier tonight. When he starts to drink, he gets a little grabby with the ladies, and tonight he was in rare form.
We're doing shots when I get back, okay? Oh, hey, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Oh, nothing to be sorry about, baby.
I just gotta go to the bathroom.
No, it's okay. Oh, you're so
Get
beautiful.
off me. Stop!
What?
Get off of me!
Whoa, get off me! No. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Let's go, Cap. I'm sorry.
he by chance leave in a white car?
I didn't go outside.
The bouncer said, well, I didn't go outside to see where he went. My only concern was get him out of there before the problem got worse than it already was.
Do you know the woman that he was messing with?
You know, I'd never seen her before, but the weird thing is, after Calvin got thrown out, she followed right behind him.
This leads us to wonder, who is this woman who followed him out? And is she part of this in some way? Or is she just somebody that happened to leave at the same time he did?
Well, we appreciate the help. Thanks.
As the sun rises, Kenda is met with two objectives.
In addition to Mr. Blair, we need to find a white car that was at the Cloud9 Lounge, and that's where the work needs to start.
Hey, Lieutenant. I got somebody here you might want to meet.
What do you mean?
Detective Wood says, we just had a guy walk in here who says he knows everything about this, and he has an attorney with him. Who? When people come into a police station with a lawyer that says they have knowledge, it's because they do.
I'd never guess what kind of car he drives.
Please tell me he's got a white car.
Well, now, I can't wait to see what this guy's got to say. So we've been up all night investigating the untimely demise of Calvin Blair, and we have somebody wander in the door, attorney in hand, driving a white car that says he knows all about this.
This party was identified as Larry Jones. This is a DJ at the Cloud9 bar and was working the night of this incident.
All right, so you want to tell us what happened?
My client's here because he's a friend of Calvin Blair's. He wants to set the record straight on what led to Mr. Blair's death.
Okay, I'm all for that. So how do you know Mr. Blair?
We go way back to days in the military together. We've been tight ever since. He's a really cool guy, except when he gets drunk.
That particular evening, Larry says that Calvin's nice to everybody, but then he starts to get a little drinking too much. And there's a girl there that Larry had brought there.
Her name's Lucy Har.
Is this your girlfriend or?
No. She's just a friend. She asked me to bring her to the club and asked if I could take her back home when I was done DJing. I said, sure, no problem.
Larry's working behind the turntables. And Lucy's meeting her friends and people she knows.
Did Lucy know Calvin?
Not until last night.
Larry explains that it's getting late in the evening. Calvin's pretty intoxicated, and he bumps into Lucy.
Nothing to be sorry about, baby.
This leads to Calvin being kicked out of the bar.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was done DJing, and I walked over to Lucy and see if she was all right, and she was still pretty steamed. You okay?
Yeah. That guy was a creep.
Yeah, I know. Unfortunately, he gets that way when he drinks.
Do you know him?
Yeah, Calvin. He's been going through a lot lately. Anyways, we gotta find him.
What?
Yeah.
He said, look, he's my friend, and I'm not gonna let him just walk down the street as drunk as he is. Something's bad's gonna happen to him. And I'm gonna take him home.
You said you were gonna take me home. You don't expect me to ride in the same car with him, do you?
It's cool. It'll be all right. I got you.
Lucy wasn't very happy about that, but she's going to have to go along with it.
What's up, Cal? Cal, you ready to go, bro?
Yeah.
Come on, Lucy.
It got a little ickier when they got into his car. There wasn't a back seat. Calvin was apparently really wildly drunk. Not just drunk, but crazy drunk. I think the situation was far worse than either Larry or Lucy realized.
They're headed in the general direction of Calvin's house because he lives closer than Lucy does. And Calvin's giving Larry instructions that don't make any sense.
No. This is the wrong way. You gotta go that way.
Yo, Calvin, bro, you literally just told me to turn up here.
No, you gotta go that way.
This dumbass doesn't even know where he lives.
What'd you say?
I said you're a dumbass and you don't know where you live.
Yo, Calvin, what the hell are you doing? Calvin, what the hell are you doing, bro?
Larry says Calvin's other personality takes over, and he grabs her by the throat and starts choking her, completely unprovoked.
That's when I saw her pull out a knife out her purse.
She brought a knife with her?
Yeah, she ran into some trouble once before, and ever since then, she carries a blade around with her. She even poked him in the leg with it.
Larry said he decided he better stop and get control of this situation, so he pulled off the side of the road.
Larry says he couldn't see what was going on.
Probably in the time it took for him to walk around the car. Lucy stabbed him the second time in the chest.
Man, what are you doing?
According to Larry, he saw Calvin stagger away, but assumed it was because Calvin was drunk.
I had no idea how bad he was hurt till I saw it on the news that morning. And that's when I went over to Lucy's and asked her if she knew about it.
He goes over to Lucy's place and he wakes her up. Says, "Hey, Calvin's dead." And her reply was, "He can't be dead because no one thought he was as hurt as he looked."
I told Lucy that I was going to get a lawyer, and she better get one too, because I was going to tell the police exactly what happened.
Now, if we believe Larry, and we do, that's going to be the next arrival at the police station. And we are absolutely correct in that.
My client will not be making a statement of any kind. She exercises her right to remain silent.
And you're sure about that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then. Now you're under arrest for murder.
So we arrest her for second-degree murder. And we inform the district attorney this is a perfect case to take to a grand jury. I think it could be justifiable homicide, but I don't get to decide that.
The members of the grand jury agree. They determine that Lucy Harr acted in self-defense and vote to drop all charges.
This is a case of people getting together late at night, one of whom has a problem with alcohol, another of whom has probably been assaulted in the past, and their paths cross. Inadvertently, how quickly life can end when those mysterious paths get crossed.
Coming up, a young woman is the victim of an accidental shooting, but Kenda senses something more sinister beneath the surface.
We are determined to learn how this happened to her.
What did you just say?
The trouble is, I don't know what she's concealing.
It's late in the evening, and tonight, Lt.Joe Kenda has traded his badge for an apron.
Kathy had prepped the meal, so all I had to do was put it in the oven. Even I could do that.
It's supposed to be that color?
I'm a much better detective than I am a cook. My cooking can be described as death from within.
I'm home.
Great. You're just in time. Have a seat.
So we're about to sit down. She's all smiles.
There we go.
The phone rings.
It's Kenda.
She knows who it is, and the smile fades away quickly.
Sorry, dear.
Just come home in one piece, okay?
I always do.
It's time to go to work.
Minutes later, Kenda is on scene and gets a briefing from Detective Skip Arms.
Hey, Lieutenant.
Hey, Skip. You been inside yet?
Nah, Leibowitz has.
Hey, Leibowitz! So what do we got?
Got one victim on the way to the hospital. She's been shot. It's pretty bad.
26-year-old Alexandra Drake is in critical condition.
What happened?
We got a 911 call. Someone had been shot.
Please, Kenda. Hey, help her! Raise your hand. Help her! She's inside. She's all covered in blood.
Leibowitz says a man runs outside and he is covered in blood.
Suspect come out of the house, took him into custody.
They don't know what's going on here, but this guy's not going anyplace. They grab him and throw him in a police car.
I went in and cleared the house, and that's where I found the victim.
Leibowitz says that this woman has been shot in the chin.
Stay with me, I got the ambulance coming.
Obviously from close range, and she's gasping and unable to speak.
Is that the guy?
Yes, sir, that's him. That's her boyfriend, Perry Nyland. He called 911 to say somebody's been shot, but we haven't been able to get much out of him.
All right, why don't you go inside and I'll go have a word with Mr. Nyland.
Yes, sir.
So I go over and open the door to this police car and have a chat with Mr. Nyland.
Look, I didn't mean it, all right? It was an accident. I love her.
Just take a deep breath. Tell me what happened.
I don't know. We were sitting on our couch, and I was just loading my gun. I was cleaning it, and it just went off.
What do you mean it just went off?
I don't know. My hand slipped, and it just went off.
At a minimum, it's a reckless act. At a maximum, it's intentional.
Sit tight, Mr. Nyland. I'll be back.
So he's got a story. We will now work on the rest of this premise. And we walk back into the crime scene.
Kenda joins Detective Arms and the other officers in a search of the house.
On the coffee table, there is whiskey. There's also white powder residue. It is cocaine.
Somebody likes to party.
Yeah, not exactly the best time to clean a gun. Have you seen the gun?
Yeah, it's over here. .357 Magnum. It's still loaded except for one shot.
To Kenda's surprise, Perry's story appears to be checking out.
In the case of disturbances, when someone is at an emotional edge and is angry, they pull the trigger until it goes click, generally. In this case, only one shot was fired.
Anything else?
Yeah, take a look at this.
There were a number of holes in doors and in walls.
If you were an average person, you would see the damage to the walls and think, I wonder why they did that. I, as an experienced detective, look at that.
Where were you?
And see abusive relationships.
There's holes like this all over the place.
Let's get all the markings of domestic violence.
I am offended by men who treat women badly, deeply offended by that. I don't know that that's what's happening here, but I suspect that it is. I have enough to arrest him.
Take Mr. Nyland to jail for the night.
Yes, sir. Wait, hold on, stop! Wait, hey, look, you got it wrong. It was an accident.
Okay. Mr. Nyland, you've made your point. We will wait and see what the evidence shows. The evidence at the moment doesn't look very promising for Mr. Nyland, but we will see.
With Perry Nyland on his way to jail, Kenda and Detective Arms head to the hospital to see Alexandra Drake.
We're here to check on the condition of Alexandra Drake.
Yeah, she came in earlier. She's in pretty bad shape.
How bad?
Well, she has a single gunshot wound that ultimately produced 4 wounds. Entry through the chin, exit through the lower chin, entrance into the upper chest, exit through her back.
Doctors had to wire her mouth shut.
Wow.
Her mom's here if you want to speak to her, though.
Okay, thanks. What room?
Room 417.
The mother, perhaps, can give us some background. So Arms and I, we introduce ourselves to a woman who identifies herself as Brittany Drake.
Miss Drake, this is Lieutenant Kenda. I'm Detective Arms. I'm hoping that you could shed some light on your daughter's relationship with Perry Nyland.
Alexandra and I haven't been as close in the last couple months as I would have liked.
It struck me as odd that she said she's been estranged from her daughter. Something's going on with this family that may or may not be of any of my business.
What can you tell us? How long has your daughter been seeing Perry?
She said they've lived together for about 2 years, maybe a little more. And my understanding is that this was a loving relationship. He adored her. He did everything he could for her.
How's that relationship been?
It's been good. They've seemed happy.
I was somewhat surprised by the information that Brittany gave us with the drugs and alcohol. I sort of expected Alexandra's mom to come down hard on Perry, and in fact, she did just the opposite.
All right, well, we hope for the best. And thank you for your time.
Kenda and Arms try to decipher this new information.
Well, that was interesting.
No kidding. I'm not sure how much longer we can hold Perry on those charges. Just wish we had something else.
But Kenda's concerns about being able to hold Perry Nyland are soon alleviated thanks to the intake officers at the El Paso County Jail.
The hell is this? The officers did find cocaine on his person. When they looked at his previous history, we found previous charges involving weapons and drugs. The night of this incident, he was just literally minutes of coming off of his probation for his prior charges.
Perry's latest drug mishap will mean additional time behind bars, but Kenda is focused on the shooting. The next day, Kenda and Detective Arms return to the hospital with the hope of speaking to Alexandra Drake.
We recognized at some point we were going to have to try and get some confirmation as to what happened at the residence when the shooting occurred.
Hi, Alexandra. I'm Lieutenant Kenda. I'm glad to see you're awake. If you don't mind, I'd like to try something.
So we decide if Alexandra cannot speak, then we're going to have her reply yes or no by nodding her head.
I'm going to go nice and slow. Was Perry using cocaine the night of the shooting?
Yes. Did he do so all day? No.
Okay, on these next set of questions, I need to be perfectly honest. Did Perry shoot you? Did he intentionally shoot you?
That caused us to pause for a few minutes. We had to kind of reflect on what she was telling us.
Wait a minute. All of the signs point to this being somebody who wanted to harm you, and you're telling us it was an accident?
That's okay. You can tell us the truth. Was this an accident?
I'm unclear whether Alexandra's telling me the truth. I'm not convinced I know what happened here, and I'm not about to give up until I do know. We're investigating the shooting of Alexandra Drake, 26-year-old female, gunshot wound to the face, delivered close contact by her boyfriend companion, Perry Nyland.
Alexandra, we found something in your home. The walls had holes punched in them. Has Perry ever hit you?
He's never hurt you?
Oh, baby, it's okay. No, it's okay. It's okay, honey.
We're gonna let you get some rest now. We'll come back if we think of any other questions. I hope you get well soon.
It's very common in women who are abused that they will defend the male companion. They will say it's their fault and they deserved it.
With Alexandra still maintaining that the shooting was accidental, Kenda has no choice but to book Perry Nyland on the lesser charge of second-degree assault.
We don't have enough information from her statements to prove it was an intentional act with a deadly weapon. So Perry was able to post a bond.
While Perry remains free until his trial, Alexandra's condition takes a turn for the worse.
2 months into this event,
It's Kenda.
we get a call from Penrose Community Hospital that says that Alexandra Drake has slipped into a coma. This is not good.
Hey, how's she doing? Is there any chance of surviving?
The doctor says there's a chance, but she's in pretty grave shape. Her mom's been by her bedside every day.
Her mom's here now?
Yeah, actually, I'm glad that you're both here. Something happened that I feel like you should probably know about.
Missed you a lot.
She said they've been writing letters to each other, and something that the girl wrote really upset the mother. Now, that really piqued my interest.
Did you happen to see what she wrote?
I didn't see what was on it.
So it's pretty obvious what we're going to do. We're going to go talk to Brittany Drake and say, what's this business about letters?
Brittany, you need to tell us what's going on. And we just want to help Alexandra.
I know. I'm sorry. Honestly, I was going to get in touch with you guys. It's just that it's been so long since I've had a good relationship with Alexandra, and it's just so hard.
She said, I felt somewhat guilty about not maintaining a relationship with my daughter before she was hurt. But over the last 2 months of her injury...
Do you remember the name of that place we used to go to, that lady?
And I've been here every day. We have managed to develop the relationship we had before.
I just need more time, just to let her know how much I love her.
I'm sorry it took something like this for the two of you to reconnect. Do you mind if I ask what drove you apart?
That's not an easy thing to answer. Basically, every guy she ever dated mistreated her. You know how hard it is as a mother to watch your child have those kind of relationships?
I'm a parent. I understand the nature of it. I truly do. Life is complicated. Can't teach them how to fall in love. They have to figure that out on their own. And sometimes it doesn't go so well.
So the note that she wrote on the notepad the other day, was that about the shooting?
Yeah. I think she knew she wasn't going to make it.
She says that her daughter has been having misgivings about what she told us about this incident.
We need to tell somebody.
What did it say?
It said that he did it on purpose.
I'll get the warrant.
Thank you for being honest.
Armed with new evidence, the detectives are determined to rearrest Perry Nyland. But it turns out the highway patrol beat them to it.
Mr. Nyland is out on bond, and he gets arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol. How shocking.
My girlfriend, she's dying in the hospital. It's all my fault.
Yeah, watch your head.
Listen, officer, I didn't mean to drink that much, okay? I just did.
We'll make a note of that, Mr. Nyland. About 2 weeks after Alexandra Drake falls into a coma, she dies. As a result of her death, the second-degree assault charge against Mr. Nyland for this shooting is replaced with a charge of manslaughter.
While Kenda can't be sure what exactly occurred, he believes the drugs, along with Perry Nyland's history of violence, played a major role.
Perry is a prolonged user of cocaine. They have arguments all the time about everything, including nothing.
Probably slow down.
Why don't you shut the hell up?
I think Perry was high.
What? What'd you say? What did you just
I
say?
did not say anything.
What did you just say?
I didn't say anything,
You would say
Perry.
it. Say it again.
He reacts and takes it out on Alexandra.
I did say
In a moment of rage, he pulls the trigger.
On August 1st, 1986, Perry Nyland is convicted of criminally negligent homicide and sentenced to 5 years in prison.
Some people say love with a kiss. Some people say love with a look. Mr. Nyland says it with a round from a .357 Magnum revolver, but it's not accident. Guns don't go off. They don't, unless you make them go off.
They called it a victory, a breakthrough, a headline that finally closed a wound. Seattle, 1991, cold case solved, suspect arrested after 30 years. The words flashed across screens, slid into push notifications, filled the evening news with bold red banners and triumphant anchors. But behind the headline, in a quiet evidence room that smelled of dust and old paper, a cardboard box still sat on a metal shelf, its labels fading, its edges soft, its story anything but finished. It began on a Friday night in October 1991, when Seattle's rain sounded like static on every downtown awning, when neon signs bled across wet pavement and the city felt smaller, tighter, as if the storm itself were closing in. 19-year-old Hannah Price locked the glass door of the Harbor Line Diner at 11:37 p.m., waved at the cook through the steamy window, and stepped out into the cold. She carried a black backpack, a crumpled pay envelope in her jacket pocket, and a set of keys she twisted around her finger as she walked. She never made it home. Her route was simple. 3 blocks down to the bus stop on 3rd, a right turn past the shuttered bookstore. A narrow alley shortcut everyone said was safe back then, lit by a single flickering lamp. 10 minutes, 15 at most. She was supposed to be back in the small basement apartment she shared with her older sister by midnight. The bus driver on the last route remembered waiting. He remembered the empty stop. He remembered glancing at his watch and closing the doors. At 1:12 a.m., Hannah's sister called the diner. No answer. At 1:27, she called the bus depot. At 2:04, she called the police. The dispatcher logged it as a possible missing person, a young adult likely delayed, maybe out with friends, maybe staying somewhere else. The city was big. People disappeared from phone lines more often than they vanished from the earth. The first officer arrived at 3:01 a.m., took a quick statement in a cluttered living room, and assured the shaking sister that most people turned up by morning. Morning came. Hannah didn't. By midday, the Harbor Line Diner was covered in flyers, a senior photo photocopied into grainy grayscale, the words missing. "Have you seen her?" scrawled in thick black marker. Customers pointed. Regulars whispered. Someone said they'd seen a dark car idling near the alley. Someone else swore they'd heard shouting just after closing. The manager gave statements. The cook relived the end of his shift 3 times in one afternoon and remembered less each time. Detective Mark Calder from Seattle PD's Missing Persons Unit walked that route himself, counting his steps, watching the way the rainwater pooled in the alley, listening to the echo of his own boots on the slick concrete. It was a short walk, a safe one, a route people used every night. But that night, somewhere between the locked glass door and the empty bus stop, the city swallowed a girl whole. At 5:42 p.m., a patrol car found Hannah's backpack in a narrow gap between 2 dumpsters behind a print shop, 30 yards off the alley, just far enough that no one would have noticed it unless they were looking. The contents were too neat. Wallet inside, pay envelope sealed, lipstick, notebook, bus pass. Nothing spilled, nothing torn, nothing that screamed struggle. It looked placed. It looked arranged. It looked like a message. Reporters showed up before sunset, drawn by words they heard over the police scanner. Young woman, missing, last seen at work, belongings found in alley. It was the kind of line that had weight, the kind that turned into cold case specials decades later. Cameras rolled while the light faded. The alley, for one day, became the center of the city's fear. By midnight, the phrase mysterious disappearance had slipped into the late news. By Sunday, the banner was shorter, sharper, colder. Seattle 1991 missing waitress case shocks community. And in the center of it all was a girl whose last walk home had turned into something else entirely, something the city would come to know as simply the Harbor Line case. The first 72 hours would decide everything. Detective Calder knew that. He'd learned it in training, in briefing rooms, in other people's tragedies. But he also knew something else as he stood in that alley, rain dripping from the brim of his coat, the glow of police tape reflected in puddles. The Harbor Line case felt wrong from the start, too clean, too calculated, too quiet. And somewhere, just beyond the yellow tape and the camera flashes, someone was watching the scene they had created, listening to the city spell out the words they had written in the dark. The Harbor Line Diner reopened on Monday because bills didn't stop piling up just because someone went missing. The coffee still poured, the grill still hissed, and customers still asked for extra napkins, but everything felt bent out of shape. The corner booth where Hannah usually rolled silverware sat empty. The manager wiped it twice as often as any other table, as if cleaning could erase the outline of absence. Detective Calder started with the basics: coworkers, friends, family, anyone who had seen Hannah in the hours before she vanished. Her sister, Lauren, sat at the small kitchen table, fingers clenched around a mug of cold tea, replaying every conversation, every text, every look. Nothing stood out, no fight, no secret plan, no dramatic goodbye. Hannah had been tired, excited about her paycheck, annoyed about the weather, ordinary things, boring things, the kind of details that never made it into the evening news. Her co-workers, though, remembered something else. The cook, Jose, said she'd checked the clock obsessively that night, like she was counting down. The new waitress, Tanya, said she'd caught Hannah staring out at the rain, not at the street, but at her own faint reflection in the glass, like she was listening to something only she could hear. When asked if Hannah seemed scared, no one could say yes, but no one could say no either. The first concrete lead came from a bus driver. Route 12, downtown loop. He swore he'd seen Hannah a week earlier arguing with a man near the very same bus stop, not shouting exactly, but close. Voices low, tight, urgent. Hannah stepped back. The man stepped closer. The driver had pulled away when the light changed, telling himself it was none of his business. Now his regret came wrapped in details. The man was mid-30s, maybe older. Dark jacket, baseball cap, a scar on his jawline, or maybe just stubble catching the light. A composite sketch went out, newspapers printed it. Local TV flashed it between weather segments and sports highlights. The city stared at the grainy drawing, the hollow eyes, the shadowed jaw, the neutral mouth that suddenly seemed sinister because someone told them it might be. Tips poured in, the way they always do at the start before apathy sets in. Ex-boyfriends, creepy regulars, neighbors with odd habits. Seattle suddenly felt full of men with dark jackets and baseball caps and half-remembered scars. One name rose to the top of the list: Tyler Mason, 26, part-time mechanic, on and off boyfriend. He and Hannah had a history, the kind that neighbors heard through thin walls. Arguments, doors slamming, apologies, promises, breakups that never quite stuck. He denied being anywhere near the diner that night. He claimed he was working late in the garage, that his boss could vouch for him. The problem was, his boss couldn't. Not exactly. Not in a way that felt locked down. Interrogation room lights have a way of turning everyone into suspects. Tyler sweated, stammered, bristled with indignant outrage. He admitted they'd argued the week before about a job offer she was considering in Portland, about her running away from problems instead of fixing them. He insisted he loved her. He insisted he'd never hurt her. He repeated it until it sounded rehearsed, then repeated it again until even he didn't seem sure. No blood in his car, no fibers on his clothes, no witnesses placing him at the alley that night. The composite sketch looked like him from one angle and not at all like him from another. The detectives wrote his name in thick dark letters at the top of a list and underlined it twice. Person of interest, not arrested, not cleared, just stuck in the limbo that lies between guilt and innocence, where cold cases like to begin. Then came the second discovery. 2 days after the backpack was found, a city worker cleaning an underpass a mile away spotted something tucked behind a concrete support. A single white sneaker, soaked and stained, laces knotted tight. Sealed inside was a folded photograph, warped by water but still visible. Hannah, standing in front of the Space Needle, smiling at the camera. The picture was sliced cleanly through the middle, the cut stopping right at her throat. Someone had taken the time to select that image, to fold it, to hide it, to pair it with a shoe that could have belonged to anyone or no one. It didn't prove she was dead. It didn't prove she was alive. It didn't prove anything. But it felt like another message, another arranged artifact placed where someone knew it would eventually be found. The media latched onto it instantly. The word shifted from missing woman to possible abduction, from disappearance to mysterious case, from ordinary fear to something sharper. One station ran with the new title, Seattle 1991 Alleyway Mystery. Strange clues, no answers. Ratings climbed. Phones rang. Anonymous callers claimed to know what happened. Most didn't. A few might have. Sorting the difference became its own kind of investigation. Detective Calder pinned the warped photograph to the center of a corkboard in his office, a permanent reminder that someone out there was still participating in the story. Someone was staging scenes. Someone was thinking in headlines. And if they were thinking in headlines, they were watching them too. The real timeline of a cold case isn't built from big events. It's made from fragments, voices, half-truths, moments that almost matter and then don't. In the first month after Hannah vanished, the Harborline case became a collage of these fragments, cluttering the detective's notes, filling up the margins with questions that refused to close. Neighbors remembered a car idling outside the apartment building in the week before she disappeared. Different nights. Same car, dark sedan. Out-of-state plates, maybe. Or maybe just dirty. The engine never shut off. The driver never got out. By the time anyone thought to write down a license number, the car was gone, and memory had blurred the details like rain on ink. Coworkers mentioned the phone calls. Late evenings, no voice on the other end. Just soft static like a TV left on in an empty room. Once Hannah answered, listened for a few seconds, and hung up with a forced laugh. "Wrong number," she said. "They keep doing that." No one asked who they were. No one wanted to seem dramatic. Looking back, every silence started to feel like a mistake. Her notebook yielded more. Scrawled at the bottom of a page about tips and schedules and grocery lists was a single line, written darker than the rest. He was there again. No name, no explanation, just that. On the next page, the corner was torn off as if something had once been written there and then ripped away. The city's fear hardened into routine. The first week, everyone checked over their shoulder when they walked home at night. The second week, they traveled in pairs. By the third, some slipped back into their old habits because constant fear is exhausting. You can't live on high alert forever. You get tired. You forget. You convince yourself that bad things happen to other people, in other alleys, in other parts of town. Detective Calder didn't forget. He drove the alley route at odd hours, engine low, lights off, watching the shape of the city at night. He scanned the faces of men waiting at bus stops, leaning in doorways, smoking under bridges. He questioned known offenders, ex-cons, drifters passing through. Everyone had an alibi until someone could prove otherwise. Almost no one liked being asked to prove it. Then a new voice entered the case. 4 weeks in, a woman called the tip line with a story that should have been nothing more than a strange coincidence. She'd been walking her dog near the waterfront 2 nights before Hannah disappeared when a man approached her, asking if she needed a ride. He'd been polite, almost overly so, standing just far enough away to seem harmless, just close enough to make her skin crawl. She refused. He insisted. She lied and said her husband was waiting nearby. The man left, but not before giving a small, practiced smile that never touched his eyes. She remembered the car, dark sedan, old. A faint dent on the passenger door. She remembered the way he had said her name without her telling him. She remembered the exact moment she decided that nothing about him was harmless. She only called the police when she saw the composite sketch on TV and felt that same crawling sensation return. The man she'd met wasn't an ex-boyfriend. He wasn't a co-worker. He wasn't from the safe, familiar circle Hannah lived in. He was something else. Outside, unconnected, the kind of stranger every safety lecture warns about and everyone secretly believes they'll never meet. The problem was, her description overlapped with too many others and contradicted just as many. Dark hair or light, slight accent or none. Taller than she was, but she wasn't sure how tall she was when fear was compressing the moment into something distorted. Her memory felt like a photo that had been copied too many times. The edges blurred more each retelling. Still, the pattern began to emerge. A car, an older man. A way of appearing quietly on the edges of people's lives, just long enough to be noticed, not long enough to be understood. Calder circled it in his notes. Not a name, not a suspect, just a shape, a shadow. The press fed on that shadow. Reporters asked if Seattle had a predator stalking women near bus stops. The police stood at podiums and said there was no evidence to suggest a serial offender. They used phrases like isolated incident and ongoing investigation, and no indication of a wider threat. The public heard something else. We don't know. Weeks turned into months. The flyers on telephone poles curled at the edges, their tape yellowing, Hannah's face fading in the sun. The Harborline Diner went back to taking late-night orders from taxi drivers, bar staff, insomniacs. The alley remained an alley. Trash collected, graffiti multiplied. Footsteps echoed differently there, heavier with the knowledge of what might have happened once and could happen again. And somewhere, the person who knew exactly what had happened walked those same streets, listened to those same newscasts, watched the city move on, and realized an ugly, powerful truth. Sometimes, if you plan carefully enough and pick your moment well, people don't just vanish. They are allowed to. By 1993, the Harborline case had acquired a title it didn't have at the beginning. The word cold slipped into conversations at the precinct, unofficial at first, whispered in hallways, mumbled over coffee. It wasn't just a descriptor, it was a sentence, a pronouncement that the trail had cooled, that leads had dried up, that the machinery of investigation had slowed to a reluctant crawl. Detective Calder hated the word, but he felt it settling over the file like frost. He revisited Tyler Mason repeatedly. No new evidence ever appeared to tip the scales. Tyler moved away to Spokane, then to Portland, changing addresses like a man trying to outrun a shadow attached to his name. Each time he resurfaced in records, Calder's pulse ticked up. Each time, nothing connected him concretely to the night in question. People in his orbit said the same things. Temperamental but not violent, moody but harmless, guilty of bad decisions but not, they insisted, of murder. The case file thickened, not with breakthroughs, but with failed possibilities. A reported sighting of Hannah in Vancouver turned out to be another woman entirely. An anonymous letter claiming knowledge of her watery grave led divers to a submerged shopping cart and a rusted bicycle, nothing more. A jailhouse informant promised details in exchange for a reduced sentence. His story fell apart in under an hour. Years have a way of compressing themselves when you look back at a case like this. In reality, they're built from long, quiet stretches where nothing happens. Evidence shelves gather dust. The phone doesn't ring. The box with her name on it sits, patient and heavy, waiting for hands that never reach for it. Still, the case never fully disappeared from public memory. True crime shows were starting to emerge in the mid-90s, testing the waters for an audience hungry for unsolved mysteries. The Harbor Line case fit perfectly into their format. A pretty face, a rainy city, a vanished walk home, eerie clues, no resolution. A local production did a 30-minute special adding moody music and slow-motion reenactments of Hannah stepping into the alley, looking back one last time, disappearing into shadow. Ratings were respectable. Viewers called in with new tips. Most led nowhere. But one detail from the program stuck in the mind of a quiet clerk working nights in an auto parts store, the old sedan with the dented door. He remembered a man who came in often in the early 90s, paying cash, buying parts to keep a decaying car alive long past its natural life. The man was polite, forgettable, the kind of customer who never gave a last name. But the clerk remembered the car because it had the same strange, crescent-shaped dent on the passenger door the witness had described, as if someone had struck it with a pipe and the metal had never recovered. The clerk called the tip line. The description he gave didn't match Tyler. Different age, different build, different presence. This man had been quieter, more contained, with the unnerving calm of someone who always seemed to be thinking one step ahead. He always came alone. He always left quickly. He always parked at the far edge of the lot, where the cameras of that era didn't quite reach. Calder pulled old purchase logs. Nothing was computerized back then. Boxes of paper receipts came down from storage, their ink fading. He searched for patterns, repeating signatures, consistent handwriting, any trail. He found a cluster of similar purchases over a 2-year period, brake pads, taillights, window seals, all marked with the same messy initials, RK. It wasn't much, it wasn't a full name, but it was a different shape of suspect, one untethered to Hannah's known life, not the volatile boyfriend, not the persistent regular at the diner. This one existed in the negative space around her case. A car near an underpass, a man offering rides, a series of parts bought for a vehicle that looked like the one no one had thought to track when it mattered. The problem was, the world doesn't pause for a single unsolved mystery. The precinct had new cases, fresh victims, more immediate crises, resources shifted. Calder was moved to a different unit for a time. The Harbor Line file was transferred to the cold case shelf, where it joined other boxes bearing other names, each with their own headlines, their own alleys, their own unanswered questions. Seattle changed. The skyline grew teeth, new towers, new tech, a new version of the city that tried to erase the grainy analog memory of the early 90s with glossy glass and steel. The Harbor Line diner closed, reopened as a coffee shop, then closed again. The alley remained. It always did. Hidden in plain sight between buildings that never realized they'd been cast as silent witnesses. Hannah's family changed too. Her parents left the state, unable to stand the rain, the bus stops, the feeling that every alley was a crime scene. Lauren stayed. She moved apartments, changed jobs, grew older, carried her sister's photo in a wallet that changed but never threw the picture out. Some years she called the police on the anniversary, some years she didn't. Grief is not a neat arc, it's a loop. Some days it tightens, some days it drops away entirely, only to snap back without warning. Every so often, a new detective would pull the box down and flip through the file, reminded of the name by a training session, a supervisor's list, a news rerun. They would look at the photograph of a girl in front of the Space Needle, the altered copy found in the shoe, the composite sketches, the conflicting statements. They would feel the same thing Calder had felt all those years before. The case wasn't truly dead. It just needed the right question, the right angle, the right piece of information to snap it back into focus. But for nearly 3 decades, that piece refused to appear. Out in the city, the car with the crescent-shaped dent was eventually scrapped. The man with the quiet smile blended back into the population, or moved away, or died, or changed his name. The story hardened into legend, then into a brief paragraph whenever journalists listed Seattle's most haunting unsolved mysteries, and then in 2018, long after most people had stopped expecting anything new, technology breathed cold air back into the Harborline case and turned it, very slowly, into the kind of story that would one day carry the word "solved" in its headline. In 2018, the Seattle Police Department's cold case unit was smaller than most people imagined. No cinematic war room. No wall-sized boards with threads looping across them. Just a cramped office with mismatched desks, buzzing lights, and shelves lined with boxes that felt heavier than the paper inside them. Each box was a promise that had never been kept. Detective Lena Ortiz transferred in that spring, carrying with her a quiet determination and a reputation for noticing things other people missed. She wasn't there for glory. Cold cases almost never come with it. She was there because unsolved stories bothered her in a way she couldn't easily explain. On her third day, she pulled the Harborline box down from the shelf, more out of instinct than design. The name meant nothing to her at first. The label read simply, Price, Hannah, 10/1991, Harborline Diner disappearance. Inside, she found the past, Polaroid photos, typewritten reports, handwritten notes in fading ink. It felt like stepping into a different era of police work, one where everything was tactile, immediate, flawed in ways that digital records would later be too. She read the file cover to cover, the tidy summary reports, the messy margins, the original interviews, the follow-up interviews, the descriptions of the backpack, the underpass, the shoe, the sliced photograph. She saw patterns that had been invisible when scattered across years. She also saw opportunity. Advances in forensic technology had given cold case units a new kind of power. DNA analysis had become more sensitive. Fingerprint databases had expanded. Techniques that hadn't existed in 1991 were now standard. Ortiz requested the physical evidence and sent it back through the modern machine, swabs from the backpack straps, fibers from the shoe, the tape that had sealed the folded photograph, the partial print lifted from the inside of the pay envelope that had once been considered too smudged to be useful. It wasn't magic. Old evidence is stubborn. Humidity handling, time, all degrade its secrets. Weeks went by. Other cases took priority. Ortiz worked through them methodically. But the Harborline file stayed open on her desk, a silent gravity pulling her back. Then an email appeared in her inbox from the lab. One word in the subject line, hit. The partial print from the pay envelope, long dismissed as a ghost image, had yielded a partial match thanks to updated algorithms. Not a direct identification, but a strong overlap with prints belonging to an older offender whose data had entered the system only a few years earlier. A man arrested for a series of burglaries in Tacoma, arrested, convicted, released, now living back in Seattle. His name was Richard Keller. The initials on the old auto parts receipts, RK, came roaring back into relevance. Ortiz felt the shift immediately. The case was no longer just a historical puzzle. It had a living thread reaching into the present. She pulled Keller's file. Mid-60s, divorced, no children. A string of property crimes stretching back to the late 80s, mostly nonviolent. On paper, he looked like a career thief, not a kidnapper or a killer. But paper had been wrong before. She studied his mugshots. A long face. A cautious gaze that seemed to slide away from cameras. A thin, pale scar tracing his jawline, easy to miss if you weren't looking. In the composite sketch from 1991, the jawline scar had been a maybe. In this photo, it was a certainty. Keller lived alone in a small house south of the city, the kind of place realtors called cozy and neighbors called quiet. Ortiz and her partner drove by 3 times before they knocked, watching the way the curtains stayed half drawn, the way an aging sedan rested in the driveway, its body scarred by old dents, some repaired, some not. When Keller opened the door, he squinted against the daylight as if he wasn't used to it. He agreed to talk. They sat in a living room that smelled faintly of oil and dust. Tools lined the shelves. A dusty TV muttered static in the corner. On the coffee table lay a dog-eared newspaper folded to the crime section. He denied knowing the name Hannah Price. He denied ever visiting the Harborline Diner. He denied owning a car in 1991, then corrected himself and said he might have, but couldn't be sure. Memory, he said, was tricky at his age. He smiled when he said it, that same small, practiced smile the woman with the dog had described decades earlier. Ortiz asked about the fingerprints. Keller shrugged. He'd worked on lots of cars back then, handled lots of envelopes, paid people, been paid, smudged his prints on 100 things that were never meant to be evidence. He asked if she had any idea how many surfaces in this city could probably trace back to his fingertips. He made a joke. It landed wrong. They left that day with nothing close to a confession, but something far more valuable than the absence of one: a new center of gravity. Keller became the axis around which the Harborline case began to spin again. Old witnesses were re-interviewed. The woman with the dog, now older, more fragile, listened to a decades-old tape of her own voice before trying to recall the man under the waterfront streetlight. She wasn't sure it was Keller, but she wasn't sure it wasn't. In the evidence room, the box with Hannah's name shifted nearly an inch closer to the front of the shelf, a small physical symbol of something larger. After nearly 30 years, the case was waking up. What no one knew then, not Ortiz, not Keller, not the city about to be reminded of a girl who had vanished before some of its current residents were even born, was that this slow, careful revival of an old file would eventually lead to the 4 words that changed everything. Cold case finally solved. Words that looked absolute on paper, that sounded final on television, that triggered a wave of relief, outrage, fascination. Words that would prove, in the end, to be only partly true. By 2020, the pieces of the Harborline puzzle had started to align in a way that made prosecutors lean forward and journalists sharpen their pencils. It wasn't just the partial fingerprint anymore. It was the way Keller's life traced the edges of the original investigation like a watermark. Old employment records showed he'd worked as a mechanic at a garage 3 blocks from the Harborline diner in 1991, the same garage where Tyler had briefly held a job. Shifts overlapped, faces passed each other in hallways, conversations echoed in break rooms, yet no one remembered Keller being interviewed back then. Somehow, he never made it onto the board of suspects. Vehicle registration archives, half digitized and half crumbled, yielded a line item tying Keller to a 1984 dark blue sedan with a documented insurance claim. Damage to the passenger door from an unknown impact. No photograph accompanied the report. The dent that witnesses described lived only in memory and on paper. His address at the time placed him less than a mile from the underpass where the shoe and sliced photograph had been found. Each individual detail could have been coincidence. Together, they felt like gravity. Ortiz brought everything to the cold case review panel. Detectives, prosecutors, forensic analysts crowded into a room that suddenly felt more important than its flickering projector and stained carpet suggested. She laid out the case not as a story, but as a pattern. The original timeline, the missed connections, the fingerprints, the car, the addresses, the behavior, the way Keller had slipped just outside the frame of the original investigation, as if he'd known exactly how to live in a blind spot. The prosecutor assigned to review the file, Assistant District Attorney Michael Hargrove, was cautious by nature. 30-year-old cases don't make easy trials. Evidence goes missing. Witnesses die. Memories rot. Juries expect crisp video and clean DNA charts, not smoky composite sketches and grainy photos of shoes by underpasses, but even he couldn't ignore the shape forming in front of him. He approved a deeper dive. Search warrants followed. Keller's house was combed, every drawer pulled, every loose floorboard pried open. They didn't expect to find a smoking gun after so long. They didn't. What they found instead were echoes. In a box under his bed, Ortiz found a stack of old Polaroids. Most were harmless. Cars in various stages of repair. Street corners, the occasional cityscape, but a handful focused on alleys, empty, anonymous corridors between buildings, captured from different angles, as if someone had been studying them. Light, shadow, blind spots. She held one up and felt the hair on her arms rise. It wasn't the Harborline alley, but it could have been its cousin. In the garage, amid buckets of bolts and jars of screws, they found a rusted license plate, caked in grime. The numbers were barely legible, but when entered into the system and cross-referenced, they matched the decayed registration of the old blue sedan. It was as if Keller had kept a trophy, not of a person, but of a vehicle that might once have been more than transportation. A stage, a container, a moving crime scene. Keller was brought in again, this time not as a casual interview, but under arrest for questioning on suspicion of involvement in the disappearance and presumed death of Hannah Price. This was when the story left the filing cabinets and hit the airwaves again. Evening news led with it. Seattle 1991 cold case suspect arrested after 3 decades. The cold word was still there, but now it shared space with phrases like breakthrough, closure, and justice at last. Old footage of the Harborline diner resurfaced. They ran the same senior photo. They interviewed Lauren, who had learned of the arrest from a detective's careful phone call only hours before the cameras appeared on her front lawn. She stood on her porch, older now, grief etched into the lines of her face, and said what families always say in these moments, that they were hopeful, that they wanted answers, that they had never stopped believing someone would be held accountable. Her voice trembled on that last word, not with certainty, but with exhaustion. Talk shows picked up the story. True crime podcasts devoted episodes to retracing the timeline, overlaying moody music onto Ortiz's meticulous work. Social media, where the case had never previously existed because it hadn't existed at all in 1991, now turned the Harbor Line case into hashtags, threads, theories. Strangers argued online about a girl they had never known and a suspect they had never met. Inside the interrogation room, none of that noise mattered. Keller denied everything, calmly, methodically. He had explanations for most of what they confronted him with. The fingerprints, transfer from a shared envelope at the garage. The car, a junker he'd kept running until it wasn't worth the hassle. The Polaroids of alleys? I like the way the light falls, he said. Cities have backsides nobody photographs. I found that interesting. When asked why he'd kept the old license plate, he shrugged. I keep a lot of things, he said. You never know when a part will come in handy. The more he spoke, the more he sounded like a man who had spent his entire life preparing for the possibility of being accused of something terrible. His answers were smooth, plausible, and chilling precisely because they were. Still, the prosecutors decided they had enough. In early 2021, a formal announcement was made, charges filed, press releases sent. The phrase Seattle 1991 cold case solved appeared for the first time as an official statement, not a speculative headline. It was careful, phrased in legal language, but the message was clear. After 30 years, Hannah Price's disappearance was no longer an unsolved mystery. It was, according to the state, a crime with a named perpetrator. The box in the evidence room was relabeled with a small, significant addition: Defendant, Richard Keller. For most of the city, that was enough. The story had a beginning, a middle, and finally, what looked like an end. Detectives had done their jobs. Technology had pulled a ghost print into focus. A suspect had been hauled into the spotlight. The narrative felt complete. But narratives are not trials. In the courtroom, where certainty is supposed to be measured not in feelings but in facts, the Harbor Line case was about to meet a different kind of cold. Trials are not cinematic panoramas. They are slow, stuttering machines that grind through testimony and exhibits one small piece at a time. When the state of Washington versus Richard Keller finally began, the courtroom looked ordinary. Fluorescent lights, scuffed benches, a jury box filled with faces that had been strangers to each other at the start of voir dire and now shared a joint responsibility they could feel but not yet fully understand. The prosecution opened with a timeline. October 1991, the Harbor Line diner, the last walk down the rain-slick alley, the discovery of the backpack, the shoe, the photograph. They used words like calculated, predatory, methodical. They painted Keller as a patient hunter of opportunity, someone who prowled the outskirts of city life, watching for routines, memorizing patterns, waiting for a gap in the noise. They leaned heavily on the fingerprint hit. The partial print inside the pay envelope matched to Keller with what the forensic examiner called a very high degree of probability, not absolute. Nothing in forensics ever really is, but strong enough in the lab's opinion to tie him physically to something that should never have passed through his hands. They presented the old registration, the dented sedan, the auto parts receipts with the initials RK. They played the tape of the woman who had refused a ride near the waterfront, juxtaposing her trembling younger voice with her steadier older one as she pointed, through tears, at a photo lineup in which Keller's face quietly waited. It was him, she said, though even she knew that the passage of decades had eroded confidence. It feels like him. It still feels like him. The jury watched Keller's expression throughout. He sat almost perfectly still, hands folded, eyes occasionally lowering to the table. He looked, in that artificial environment, like a man who could have been anyone, a neighbor, a co-worker, a stranger on a bus. That was the prosecution's point. Predators don't come labeled. They come disguised as ordinary. The defense, for their part, attacked the gaps. They brought in their own forensic expert to stress that partial prints are inherently uncertain, that algorithm improvements can be double-edged, making weak matches look stronger than they are. They emphasized the decades between the original evidence collection and the new analysis. We are not dealing with a fresh crime scene, the defense attorney reminded the jury. We are dealing with artifacts handled by dozens of people, stored in conditions no modern lab would accept, and subjected to time itself as contamination. They hammered the lack of a body, no remains, no confirmed cause of death, no physical proof that Hannah had been killed at all, instead of abducted, trafficked, vanished by some other horror unconnected to the man sitting at the defense table. The empty spaces in the narrative became their weapon. They resurrected Tyler. not as an alternative defendant exactly, but as a pointed question mark. If the police were so convinced a stranger did this, the defense argued, why did they spend the first crucial week staring at someone from her inner circle? How many other leads were neglected because they had tunnel vision? And now, 30 years later, when memories have dimmed and witnesses have died, we are supposed to take their reconstructed certainty as gospel. The word tunnel vision hung in the air. Jurors shifted in their seats. Then came the chain of custody problem. The defense produced old internal memos obtained through discovery showing that at some point in the mid-2000s, the evidence box had been temporarily misplaced during a storage reorganization. Not for long, not intentionally, but long enough that an entry logged it as location unknown for 3 days. No one could say exactly what had happened during that gap. It had probably been lost on a different shelf, then found and relabeled. The prosecution said as much. The defense turned probably into a wedge. If the box can disappear for 3 days, they asked, what assurances do we have that its contents remained untouched, that no contamination occurred, that no well-meaning technician, no hurried clerk, no careless officer compromised the integrity of the evidence on which the state's entire case rests? They also introduced something the prosecution had hoped would never see the light of day, a memorandum from the 90s mentioning an entirely different suspect briefly considered and then dismissed, a delivery driver with a history of harassing women near the diner. His name had been crossed out in thick pen, his alibi deemed solid at the time. He was later convicted of a violent assault in another state. The prosecution had determined that he was a dead lead. The defense treated him like a ghost who had come back to haunt the file. This case is not solved, the defense attorney told the jury in closing. It is patched. It is stitched together from fragments and hopes. The state wants you to look at a headline. I am asking you to look at the evidence, at the gaps, at the doubt. 30 years is a long time. It is too long to build a life sentence on maybe. In the gallery, Lauren sat rigid, knuckles white, as both sides turned her sister's life and absence into a weapon. She had wanted this trial. She had begged for it. She had told herself that anything was better than the void. But as testimony stacked up, she began to understand a cruel truth. Courts do not deal in closure. They deal in verdicts. The two are not the same. The jury filed out to deliberate with binders of exhibits, pages of notes, instructions running through their heads like static. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited, ready to blast a new headline across screens the moment the foreperson stood. Inside, in the quiet conference room where 12 citizens were suddenly tasked with rewriting history, uncertainty settled in like fog. Deliberations stretched past what anyone had predicted. 1 day, 2, 3. The media camped outside grew restless. Some outlets started to use the phrase high-profile cold case in doubt. Others speculated about a hung jury, about the difficulty of merging 1991's fragments with 2021's expectations. In the jury room, arguments spiraled around the same points. Some jurors saw Keller's presence near every key detail as too much to dismiss, a pattern demanding a conclusion. They talked about the fingerprint, about the car, about the old Polaroids and the strange fascination with alleys, about the way he answered questions like a man always braced for impact. Others kept returning to words like reasonable doubt and burden of proof. They rubbed their foreheads and stared at the instructions, at the line that said they must be firmly convinced of guilt based on evidence, not emotion. They talked about the missing body, about the compromised chain of custody, about memories that had been stretched over 30 years and now asked to support the weight of a conviction. On the 4th day, the jury sent a note to the judge asking for clarification on the standard of proof. The judge reread the instructions to them in open court. Cameras captured their tired faces. Keller sat expressionless. Lauren pressed her hands together so tightly her rings dug into her skin. When the jury finally filed back in on the 5th day, the room held its breath. The foreperson stood. The clerk asked the question, "Has the jury reached a unanimous verdict?" "Yes," the foreperson said, voice cracking slightly on the single syllable. "On the charge of murder in the 1st degree in relation to the disappearance of Hannah Price, they found Richard Keller not guilty." The words dropped like a stone. For a moment, there was no sound. Then a low murmur rose from the gallery. Someone sobbed, someone cursed under their breath. The judge called for order, voice firm, expression neutral. Keller blinked rapidly as if adjusting to a light that had suddenly shifted. The verdict did not declare him innocent. Courts do not do that. It simply said the state had not met its burden. The old headline crumpled and rewrote itself in real time. Reporters hurried to update scripts. Seattle 1991, cold case suspect acquitted. The word solved vanished from lower thirds and was replaced with still unsolved, punctuated by a throbbing question mark, both literal and implied. Outside, microphones thrust toward Lauren. She declined to speak, tears carving new lines through old ones. Ortiz stood on the courthouse steps, shoulders squared against questions. She had done what detectives are trained to do: follow the evidence, build a case, present it. The system had made its decision. That didn't mean the system was right. It didn't mean it was wrong. It meant exactly and only what the verdict said, not proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Keller walked out of the courthouse a free man. He didn't rush. He moved with deliberate, measured steps, flanked by his attorney, eyes skimming over the crowd, past the cameras, past the reporters. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply absorbed the chaos around him and kept walking. Someone shouted, "Did you kill her?" He didn't answer. Legally, he never had to again. On talk shows that night, commentators picked sides. Some called the verdict a failure of justice, a slap in the face to cold case units everywhere. Others praised the jury for resisting the pull of a narrative and sticking to the strict standard of proof. Everyone, no matter their angle, used Hannah's name. The old box in the evidence room was pulled off the pending trial shelf and placed back with the other cold cases. The new label bearing Keller's name was not removed. It was simply pushed to the back in black marker, overshadowed again by the older word in bigger letters, unresolved. Inside that cardboard container, the photograph of a girl in front of the Space Needle lay between reports and memos, her frozen smile now burdened with an additional layer of story. She was no longer just missing. She was the center of a trial that had promised answers and delivered only more complicated questions. In a small apartment across town, Lauren sat alone at her kitchen table, staring at a slip of paper she'd kept folded in her wallet for years, a note in Hannah's handwriting from before any of it happened. "Don't worry so much," it read. "I'll be fine." The verdict didn't change the fact that Hannah had never come home. It didn't erase the alley, the backpack, the shoe, the sliced photograph. It didn't stop the questions from crawling back in once the cameras switched off. What it changed was the story the city told itself. For a brief moment, Seattle 1991 cold case solved had felt like the truth. Now it was clear it had only ever been a headline. In the months after the trial, the Harbor Line case slipped back out of the constant news cycle and returned to the quieter spaces where unsolved stories live. Internet forums, late-night conversations, the occasional anniversary segment buried halfway through the evening broadcast. But something fundamental had shifted. To some, the not guilty verdict meant Keller had been vindicated, unfairly dragged through the mud by a desperate system hungry for a win. To others, he remained guilty in everything but the eyes of the law, a man who had walked away because time had eroded the evidence against him too thoroughly to hold. For the people tasked with actually working the case, neither interpretation helped. Ortiz sat at her desk one evening, long after most of the building had emptied, and flipped through the Harbor Line file yet again. The evidence was the same. The questions were sharper. The trial had forced every assumption, every decision into the open. It had exposed the cracks in the original investigation. It had also highlighted something that had been easy to overlook before. The case had never truly been about a single suspect. Hannah's last days were filled with more shadows than one man could cast. There was still the unnamed delivery driver with the crossed-out name, the car that neighbors remembered idling outside the apartment, the anonymous calls, the torn page from her notebook, the possibility that someone in her orbit had known more than they ever revealed. Ortiz requested a fresh look at phone records. In 1991, they had been skimmed with the tools available at the time, which amounted to lists on paper. Now, software could detect patterns in those lists more easily. There was a flurry of new numbers to analyze, old landlines that no longer existed, businesses that had closed, people who had died. One number, though, repeated more often than expected in the weeks before Hannah vanished, not every day. Just enough to stand out once a computer highlighted it in yellow. It belonged, back then, to a small repair shop that had since gone out of business. On paper, it was ordinary, but a note in the file triggered something in Ortiz's memory. In one of her earliest interviews, a coworker had mentioned that Hannah had been considering buying a used car. She'd talked about saving for it, about wanting to stop taking the late bus. The coworker thought she'd mentioned a mechanic who was going to help her find something cheap. The name hadn't been remembered clearly. The lead had never been followed with force. It had been one option among many, lost in the noise. Now, that vague mention of a mechanic sat beside a phone number tied to a long-closed shop. A shop that had, for a period, subcontracted with the very garage where Keller and Tyler had worked. The web tightened again, not around a single neck, but around a circle of people, places, interactions that had all passed within arm's reach of a girl who never made it home. Ortiz tracked down the former owner of the repair shop, now living 3 states away. His memory was a fractured window, clear in some places, cloudy in others. He didn't remember Hannah, but he remembered a pattern. Women coming in on recommendations, asking about cheap cars, often funneled his way by a particular mechanic from the main garage, a quiet man, older than most of the crew, always with an eye on the clock. "Lot of guys passed through that place," he said over the phone, "but that one, he stayed longer than most." "Do you remember his name?" Ortiz asked. There was a long pause on the line. "Could have been Keller," he said slowly. "Or maybe Miller, something like that. I'd have to see the old paperwork, but I don't have it anymore. Fire took out half my records years back." It was the kind of lead that would drive some detectives mad, suggestive, incomplete, enough to nudge a theory, not enough to build a charge. In another era, it might have stayed a footnote. In the age of sprawling digital speculation, it became more fuel. Online sleuths, emboldened by the trial, dove back into the Harborline timeline. They created maps of 1991 Seattle, plotting the diner, the alley, the underpass, Keller's old address, the garage, the repair shop. Their diagrams resembled spiderwebs, lines crossing and recrossing, everything connecting to everything else if you zoomed out far enough. Some insisted a conspiracy. Others saw random chaos. A few focused obsessively on Tyler again, convinced the state had targeted the wrong man entirely. They combed through his more recent life, arrests for minor offenses, failed jobs, broken relationships, and declared that he was the one who had slipped through. They made podcasts, videos, threads. The noise rose, the signal did not. In public, the department said the same thing it always said about open cases, that any new credible leads would be pursued, that the file remained active, that they had not given up on finding the truth. Internally, Ortiz knew the limits. There were only so many hours, only so much budget, only so much appetite for chasing ghosts, especially after a high-profile acquittal had left the taste of defeat in the air. Still, she kept working. Some nights she drove to the old alley, now narrower somehow, squeezed by renovations and new construction. The light had been upgraded. Security cameras watched angles that had once been blind. The city had tried, in its own way, to close the gap that had swallowed a girl in 1991. Standing there, Ortiz understood something that didn't fit cleanly into reports. The Harborline case was no longer just about who had taken Hannah. It was about what happens when a city lets itself believe a case is solved because it needs it to be, because headlines demand closure, because justice feels more comfortable when it comes with a name and a mugshot. In that sense, the verdict hadn't reopened the case. It had simply reminded everyone that, on a fundamental level, it had never truly been closed at all. The headline lived on long after the legal result tried to contradict it. Old clips were never updated. People who'd read Seattle 1991 Cold Case Solved in the months before the trial and hadn't followed the story afterwards still believed even years later that justice had been done. They'd point to the case as an example. They got that guy, they'd say. Took a while, but they did it. Memory doesn't come with corrections automatically attached. For those closer to the story, the dissonance was harder to ignore. Lauren couldn't walk past a newsstand without feeling a flash of anger at seeing her sister's name printed beneath that word, solved, as if it were a box that could be checked or unchecked. At family gatherings, well-meaning relatives would ask how she was doing now that it's over, and she'd have to decide whether to argue with their version of reality or let the moment slide. "It's not over," she would say, on the days when she had the energy. "They just don't know who did it." Sometimes people would correct her. "Didn't they say that Keller guy—" "He was acquitted," she'd reply, the phrase tasting like metal on her tongue. "That's all we know for sure." In the years that followed, other cold cases in other cities broke open with more decisive endings. Bodies found, confessions recorded, DNA matches so precise that juries didn't hesitate. Documentaries celebrated those wins. They framed them as proof that time is no longer the enemy of justice, that patient investigators and modern tools can reach back into the past and drag the truth into the light. But every success story threw the Harborline case into sharper relief. Ortiz watched those documentaries too. She took notes on techniques, on strategies, on patterns. She applied what she could. But the Harborline file remained stubborn. There were no untested rape kits sitting in storage, no unknown DNA samples waiting for a new database to match them. Most of the physical evidence had already been squeezed dry. What remained were people. A retired officer who remembered something odd about the way a certain supervisor had pushed them away from the delivery driver angle. A former regular at the diner who swore that on the night Hannah disappeared, she'd seen her talking to a man at the counter she'd never seen before. Older, polite, with a habit of watching everyone in the room as if memorizing their exits. "Could have been anyone," the woman admitted. "But when I see that Keller guy's face on TV, I think about him." Memories like that were dangerous in their own way. They were colored by everything that had come since. Asking someone in 2023 if a face from 1991 looked like a man first arrested in 2018 is like asking them to compare two ghost images. The brain wants to make patterns. It wants stories to line up. Ortiz documented it all. She filed, cross-referenced, annotated. Her reports grew careful to the point of restraint. Phrases like cannot rule out and no definitive link and significance unclear appeared over and over. Objectivity is the armor investigators wear when they have to walk daily through the emotional wreckage of other people's tragedies. One rainy night, returning once again to the alley after another dead-end lead, she stopped at the spot where the backpack had been found decades earlier. There was nothing there now but a dumpster, graffiti, a faint smell of spilled beer. She tried to reconstruct the moment in her mind. Hannah stepping into the narrow space between buildings, the hum of a distant engine, footsteps behind her, a voice saying her name, a decision, fight, freeze, run, that would never be recorded. Somewhere in there, a mistake, a miscalculation, a trust given or withheld at exactly the wrong second. It would be comforting to believe that someone, somewhere knows the full sequence, that Keller, if guilty, carries the entire story in his memory, sharp and precise. Or that someone else, some other man, some other figure wakes up every day carrying a secret he can't quite silence. Maybe that's true, maybe it isn't. Maybe the truth is more fractured, bits and pieces scattered across time and people, no one holding the whole thing. That, Ortiz realized, is the cruelest possibility, that there is no single person who could, even if they wanted to, sit down and tell the complete, unbroken story of what happened between 11:37 p.m. and the moment the last bus doors closed, without Hannah on board. All that's left are these pieces: a backpack, a shoe, a sliced photograph, a fingerprint, a car, a handful of voices echoing across 30 years, each insisting on their version of the same night. In the end, history might record the Harborline case as a cautionary tale, not just about danger in alleys or the limits of forensic science, but about headlines. About the seductive power of the word solved and the damage it can do when reality refuses to cooperate. Because the truth is simple, and it's this: there is no resolution where there is no answer, and in Seattle, even now, the answer remains missing, just like the girl who never stepped onto that last bus. Tonight, the city looks almost exactly the way it did in 1991 if you stand in the right place and squint through the rain. Streetlights still smear gold across wet concrete. Neon signs still buzz and flicker. People still hurry through alleys with their heads down, thinking of everything except the darkest things that can happen in places like this. The details change: phones, clothes, the shapes of cars. But the bones of the city stay the same. Somewhere a TV in a corner bar reruns an old segment about cold cases. The Harborline story might get a few seconds, maybe a brief montage, a smiling photo, the diner's sign, the alley. The voiceover will speak in the past tense because that's what narrators do. In 1991, 19-year-old Hannah Price disappeared on her way home from work. Decades later, a suspect was arrested, and many believe the case was finally solved. The segment will end with a soft note of uncertainty, then roll into an ad. In an apartment 2 neighborhoods away, Lauren sits by a window, listening to the rain that once swallowed her sister's footsteps. She's lived long enough now that there are people in her life who never knew Hannah, who only know her as a story told occasionally over coffee or holidays. They've seen the news clips, they've heard the podcast episodes. They ask gently if she thinks they'll ever know. She could say no, she could say yes, she could say she's learned not to trust either word. What she says instead is this: I think someone knows already, they're just not talking. And that, more than anything, is what keeps the Harborline case alive. Because unsolved cases don't haunt cities because of the crime itself. Crimes happen. Cities absorb them, scar over, keep moving. What haunts is the knowledge that someone out there walks free with a complete version of the story everyone else only has in fragments. Maybe it's Keller, older now, carrying his silence like an extra layer of skin. Maybe it's someone whose name barely appears in the file, a footnote never followed, a face glimpsed once and never connected. Maybe it's more than one person, each holding a piece they've convinced themselves is too small to matter. The file will stay on its shelf. Detectives will come and go. Some will pull it down, drawn by the name, the rain, the eerie photograph in the shoe. They'll run the evidence through whatever new technology exists. They'll ask new questions. They might find something, they might not. The alley will continue to fill with echoes every time someone new walks through it alone. And on some future night, years from now, someone might once again push a headline onto a screen. Seattle 1991 cold case solved. New confession ends decades of mystery. The city will hold its breath. Some will believe, some will doubt, some will be too tired to care anymore. Until that day, if it ever comes, the real story ends here. Not with an arrest, not with a verdict, not with a neatly folded conclusion, but with a city that still doesn't know, a family that still waits in ways both active and quiet, and an alley that will forever be more than just a shortcut between two streets. You can almost hear it if you stand there long enough. Not a scream, not a whisper, just the steady, indifferent sound of rain on pavement, like static over an unanswered call, washing over a place where, one October night in 1991, someone stepped into the dark and never came out the other side. The case file says cold. The headlines once said solved. The truth, for now, lies somewhere in the narrow, unsettling space between those two words, where the city of Seattle still waits for a voice, any voice, to finally fill in the silence. The headline never died. It just stopped being updated. Months after the verdict, after the cameras packed up and the courthouse steps emptied, the phrase Seattle 1991 cold case solved still floated out there, detached from what had actually happened. It lived in old articles that were never corrected, in archived broadcasts that still ran on late-night reruns, in blogs that had reported the arrest but never bothered to follow the trial. For a lot of people, the story ended right there, with a suspect in cuffs, a bold red banner, a satisfied anchor saying the words, after nearly 30 years, justice at last. They never saw the part where a jury said not guilty. For Lauren, that disconnect felt like a fresh wound every time she stumbled across it. She'd scroll past a thumbnail of her sister's face on some crime compilation video, the caption reading, "Cold Case Finally Solved." She'd see Hannah's name in a listicle titled, "Top 10 Cases Cracked by DNA." Strangers in the comments would write things like, "Glad they caught that monster," and "At least the family has closure." Closure, a word that sounded tidy and clean, like the click of a file drawer, a word that never once matched the way Lauren's chest felt when she woke up at 3 in the morning, convinced for half a second that her sister was in the next room, before reality came crashing back in. Some days she tried to correct it. She'd add comments. He was acquitted. They never proved it. She'd send polite emails to website admins asking them to update their posts. Most never replied. One wrote back, "Technically, the arrest solved the case, even if the jury disagreed," as if law and narrative were separate, negotiable things. They weren't to her. To her, the only thing that mattered was brutally simple. Hannah had never come home, and no one had ever been held responsible in any way that felt true. Across the city, Detective Lena Ortiz watched the same headlines linger like ghosts stuck in a glitching loop. In training conferences, other departments would occasionally mention Seattle's big cold case win, pointing to a slide still showing Keller's mugshot under the word solved. Ortiz kept her face neutral, waited for the break, then quietly corrected the speaker in the hallway. "He walked," she'd say. We didn't win anything." They would blink, embarrassed, mumble something about old slides, about meaning no disrespect. Then they'd move on to the next topic, digital evidence, AI-assisted searches, predictive models, while the Harbor Line file sat in a cardboard box hundreds of miles away, aging another hour, another day, another year. Inside the Seattle PD cold case office, there was no label that said solved. There was just the box, the same worn cardboard, the same faded handwriting. Price, Hannah, 10/1991, Harbor Line Diner disappearance. Someone had added a small sticky note after the trial. Keller acquitted, 2021. It flapped a little every time the door opened, as if the file itself were restless. Cops don't like loose ends. They live on conclusions, on charges filed, on reports that end with words like cleared and closed. The Harbor Line case had become a kind of splinter buried too deep to remove. No one could ignore it completely. No one could claim, with a straight face, that it was finished. On a gray afternoon, Ortiz sat at her desk with the file open in front of her. Outside her window, the city moved in fast forward. Delivery vans, scooters, office workers glued to their phones. Inside the pages, it was always 1991. Always a girl in a raincoat locking the diner door. Always an empty bus stop. Always an alley with a single light that never quite reached the ground. She reread the trial transcripts, not because she enjoyed revisiting the loss, but because something in her wouldn't let go. She went over the defense arguments, the chain of custody gap, the old supervisor's memo crossing out that delivery driver's name. She thought about how many choices in those early days had been made by instinct, who to believe, who to push, who to ignore. If they had knocked on one more door, if they had canvassed one more block, if someone had written one more plate number down as that blue sedan pulled away from the curb. In cold case work, if is the sharpest knife of all. The department had moved on in obvious ways. New cases stacked up with alarming speed. Fresh homicides, fresh missing persons, fresh families waiting in unfamiliar hallways for news that would hurt either way. The Harbor Line case was no longer the one everyone asked about in roll call. For most of the younger officers, it was history, something they'd seen on a streaming documentary or heard about in academy lectures. But once a year, on the anniversary of Hannah's disappearance, an email still went out, a simple reminder from the Cold Case Unit. October 19th, 1991. Disappearance of Hannah Price. If any new information comes in, route to CCU immediately. Most officers skimmed past it. A few paused, pictured the alley, then kept scrolling. Ortiz printed it and taped it above her desk anyway. Ritual matters when the facts won't move. Outside the precinct, the Harbor Line story had become background noise, part of the city's folklore. Newcomers heard it like a campfire tale. Don't walk alone near First after midnight. Remember that girl back in the 90s? They never got the details right. Some said she'd been found in the bay. Others insisted a serial killer had confessed on his deathbed. Every retelling smoothed out the rough edges, erased the acquittal, replaced uncertainty with whatever ending sounded most satisfying. Because that was the thing about stories. People didn't actually want complicated truths. They wanted arcs. They wanted villains and heroes and resolutions that arrived on time in a final act with music swelling underneath. Real life doesn't care about acts. One evening late, Ortiz spread photos of the Harbor Line alley across her desk. 1991 crime scene shots at the top. A set she'd taken on her phone more recently at the bottom. In the old ones, the bricks looked grimy, the bulbs half dead, the shadows thick. In the new ones, the light was whiter, security cameras glinting from above, a fresh coat of paint over old tags. The alley was cleaner now, safer by design, almost like the city had tried to cover the scar. In none of those photos was there any trace of Hannah. It hit her then, not as a revelation, but as a cold, settled fact. There might never be. The case might never get the missing piece it needed. No sudden confession, no long-buried remains, no miraculous new technology that could scan memory itself and play the night back in real time. The Harbor Line file might simply sit, year after year, occasionally touched, never resolved. And yet the words "cold case solved" would still be out there, preserved in pixels and ink, repeating themselves to anyone who didn't look closely enough. That was its own kind of violence, not as sharp as what had happened in the alley, but quieter, slower, corrosive. Violence against truth. Against the idea that names and files belong to real people whose stories shouldn't be wrapped up just because an editor needed a clean ending. In her small apartment, Lauren learned to live alongside that violence. She went to work, she paid bills. She let herself laugh sometimes, then flinched when she realized she'd gone a whole day without thinking of Hannah. The trial had taken something from her, a fantasy she'd secretly held on to, that one day there would be a moment where everything clicked into place, where she'd hear exactly what had happened, minute by minute, and be able to place it somewhere in her mind where it would stop scratching at the walls. Instead, what she'd gotten was a verdict that answered nothing and a wave of headlines that insisted something had been finished anyway. On nights when the rain sounded too much like it had in 1991, she'd take the old shoebox down from the closet shelf. Inside were the fragments no court had ever requested. Ticket stubs, doodles from the corners of Hannah's notebooks, a broken keychain, a faded diner order pad with a joke scrawled in the margin. None of it mattered to the case. All of it mattered to her. Tucked near the bottom was a copy of that same photograph the police had found hidden in the white sneaker under the underpass. The Space Needle behind Hannah, wind in her hair, head tilted, eyes squinting into the light. Whoever had cut the evidence photo across her throat had been careful, deliberate. The original here was whole. Lauren would hold the two side by side in her mind, one intact, one mutilated, one belonging to family, one to evidence, one a memory, one a message. Between those two images was the gap that everyone else called a mystery. To her, it felt more like an unfinished sentence. Back at the precinct, Ortiz closed the file, slid it back into the box, and wrote a new note for the front. Do not treat this as closed. Re-review with any future tech upgrades. Victim, Hannah Price. Status, missing, presumed dead. Suspect, unknown. Not Keller, not Tyler, not the nameless delivery driver or the quiet man at the counter, just that single blunt word, unknown, the most honest suspect the case had ever had. She carried the box back to the shelf herself, sliding it into its slot. For a second, her fingers lingered on the cardboard edge. It was an act that changed nothing, altered no timelines, solved no mysteries. But it was a promise, small and private, that as long as she was here, she would not let the story calcify into whatever version looked best on a headline. Because in the end, the Harbor Line case was not about the illusion of it being solved once. It was about the weight of it remaining unsolved still. Outside, the rain kept falling, the city humming, the alley waiting, and somewhere between the word cold and the word solved, in that empty space where certainty should live but doesn't, the name Hannah Price continued to echo, quieter now, but not gone. Never gone. There's a strange kind of silence that follows a story like this. Not the silence of peace, not the silence of answers finally laid out on a courtroom table, but a heavier, uneven quiet, the kind you feel when a conversation cuts off mid-sentence and everyone pretends that's the end. Tonight, that silence sits over Seattle like low cloud. On a streaming platform somewhere, a true crime playlist is auto-playing. The thumbnail is Hannah's face, frozen in that same photo the police used, the one from before the Harborline Diner, before the alley, before her name became a file number. The episode title reads, Seattle 1991 Cold Case Solved, How Detectives Cracked a 30-Year Mystery. The runtime is 38 minutes. The story stops at the arrest. It never makes it to the verdict. Someone presses play, watches 15 minutes, gets distracted, and lets it run in the background while they scroll their phone. For them, the case is over. Box checked. Mystery resolved. The algorithm moves on. But in the places where the story actually lives, nothing has moved on at all. In a third-floor apartment, the light over the small kitchen table is still on. Lauren sits there with a mug of tea gone cold, staring at a blank space on the wall where a framed photo used to hang. She took it down a week after the verdict, not because she wanted to forget, but because she couldn't stand the way visitors' eyes went straight to it, then back to her, then away. The shoebox is on the table, the one with the fragments. She flips the lid off with a motion she could perform in the dark. Ticket stubs, a dried-out pen with the Harborline logo, a folded note that says, "Stop borrowing my socks. H. A Polaroid." Lauren took the summer before everything, when they'd saved up for tickets to a concert and gotten caught in a freak downpour, laughing under a bus shelter while everyone else ran. She studies the photo. Two girls, hair soaked, eyeliner smudged, shoulders pressed together, no captions, no crime, no foreshadowing, just a moment. Her phone buzzes, a text from a number saved years ago as Date Ortiz. It isn't dramatic, no breaking news, just 4 words. Still here, still working. Lauren exhales, a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. She types back, "Thank you." She doesn't ask for details. She's learned that still working can mean reading the same paragraph for the 100th time or waiting for a lab result that never comes. The important thing is that somewhere, in an office she doesn't see, the box with Hannah's name on it isn't buried under dust and indifference. Across town, that box is exactly where Ortiz left it. Front-facing on the shelf, label rewritten, edges soft from years of being pulled out and put back. The office is quiet now, night shift, a few glowing screens, a vending machine humming. Ortiz sits at her desk, not with the file open this time, but with a blank page in front of her. She's writing something that will never make air. Not a report, not a memo, not a grant proposal, just a few lines she keeps starting and crossing out. A private document with no case number. At the top of the page, she's written, "Things we don't say in court." She taps the pen against the page, then writes, "We don't know. We might never know. We are still obligated to try." She stares at the words, then underlines the last sentence twice. It's not for a jury, it's for herself. An anchor for the days when the weight of all these unresolved names feels heavier than the metal shelves that hold them. Her computer screensaver flickers, briefly replacing the desktop with a slideshow of generic landscapes, beaches, mountains, forests untouched by crime scene tape or flashbulbs. It feels like another planet. She wakes the screen and pulls up a database instead. There's a new state initiative, a pilot program, running a different kind of analysis on old call logs, cross-referencing numbers with long-distance records, toll booth data, whatever fragments still exist. It's a long shot. They're all long shots now. She flags the Harborline case for inclusion anyway. Another request sent into the machine. Outside, the rain starts up again, sudden and steady, drumming against the windows, flowing in shining lines down the glass. On First Avenue, tourists huddle under awnings, complaining about the weather. For lifelong Seattleites, this is white noise. For Lauren, it's a sound she can't hear without thinking of Hannah's last walk. For Ortiz, it's a reminder that somewhere out there is an alley that will always be more than an alley. It's still there, of course. The buildings around it have changed. There's a new cafe at the corner, all Edison bulbs and chalkboard menus. The old Harborline Diner sign is gone, replaced first by something trendy, then by nothing at all when the space sat empty for a while. But if you step away from the main street, if you slip between those 2 brick walls, you're standing in it. The Harborline Alley. Tonight, the security camera over the entrance blinks its red light, recording nothing in particular. A line cook from the new cafe steps out to smoke his break, phone in one hand, cigarette in the other. He leans against the wall, scrolling videos, half listening to the rain. He doesn't know the full story of this place. He's heard something, a girl, back in the day, vanished, but the details are blurred, downgraded over time into one more urban cautionary tale. He takes a drag, flicks ash into a puddle, and goes back inside. For a couple of long, empty seconds, the alley is quiet. Then footsteps. A woman in a hooded jacket cuts through, carrying a grocery bag, earbuds in. The glow from her phone lights up her face in brief flashes as she checks a notification without breaking stride. She doesn't know that 30-plus years ago, another girl not much older walked this same path and never stepped back out. She doesn't know the names in the file, the arguments in that jury room, the way this strip of wet concrete has held a city's fear in its cracks for decades. She just knows it's the fastest way home. And that's the point, isn't it? Cities forget. People change. Time is merciless. A place that is sacred ground to one family is just geography to everyone else. Up on a hill overlooking that part of town, an apartment window glows. Lauren stands there, arms folded, watching the lights of traffic move like a river of red and white. Somewhere in that mess, the bus route her sister never finished still runs. New drivers, new schedules. New passengers who tap their cards and stare at screens and never once think about the night a seat stayed empty that shouldn't have. She has stopped trying to picture what happened between the diner door and the bus stop. For years, she rewound it obsessively, directing it like a film in her head. Sometimes Keller was there, blurry at the edges, sometimes Tyler, sometimes nobody she recognized, always the same rain, the same narrow turn into the alley, the same sudden break in the film where the reel burned out. Now, instead of trying to fill that break, she has learned to walk around it. She turns away from the window and goes back to the table. The shoebox is still open. She picks up the original Space Needle photo, the one no one cut. For a long moment, she just looks. The Hannah in this picture has no idea what a cold case is, no idea that her name will one day share space with words like unsolved, missing, headline, trial. Lauren whispers, "I'm still here," like a promise to the girl in the frame. Not to the case, not to the story, to her sister. Down in the cold case office, Ortiz closes her laptop and stands, stretching out a back that aches more now than it did when she first took this job. She walks to the shelf and rests her hand on the Harbor Line box, fingers splayed as if feeling for a pulse. "You're not solved," she says quietly, to cardboard and air and ink and memory. "Not until we know." There are, she knows, two kinds of endings when it comes to cases like this. There's the one the public gets, a headline, a mugshot, a narrative that can be told neatly between commercials. And then there's the one reality delivers, if it delivers anything at all, a muddy, incomplete truth that might never feel like enough. The Harbor Line case sits between those two endings, in that unnerving middle ground where a city can tell itself one thing, while the people closest to the story live with another. At some point, years from now, another detective will inherit this shelf. Ortiz will retire. The office wall color will change. The software will update. New algorithms will promise new miracles. Maybe one of them will click on a line of data no one thought to match before. Maybe a forgotten box in a different jurisdiction will give up a crucial scrap, a statement, a fingerprint, a taped confession from a man whose name never made it into any version of this story. If that happens, you already know what the headline will look like. Seattle 1991 cold case solved. Stunning new evidence ends decades of doubt. The words will glow on screens again. Older anchors will say, "Some of you may remember." Younger ones will say, "Before our time." Clips from the original arrest will play side by side with new footage. The alley will be filmed in high definition. Voices that have been waiting for half a lifetime will finally be asked, on camera, "How does it feel now that you know?" Maybe Lauren will still be here to answer. Maybe she won't. Maybe the people who loved Hannah most will have joined her in whatever quiet place the unaccounted go, when the world stops calling their names. But even if that future day never comes, the case is not truly frozen. It moves slowly, in the way a scar moves with the body that carries it. Every time someone says Hannah's name, every time a rookie cop reads the file for the first time, every time a person walking home alone chooses the main road instead of the shortcut, because of a story they only half remember, the Harbor Line case exerts its quiet gravity, and that's what remains when you strip away the trial transcripts and the forensic charts and the talking heads. Not a twist, not a reveal, not a final answer. A shape. A 19-year-old girl walking home in the rain. A family still waiting in ways that don't make television. A detective refusing to let a misprinted word in an old headline become the final version of the truth. A city that thinks it remembers what happened but doesn't, not really. There's no score swelling under this, no slow fade to black over a solved board and a closed file. There's just the sound of weather and traffic and ordinary life continuing in a place where something terrible once happened and was never fully understood. The case file says cold. The headline once said solved. The voice you're hearing now lives in the space between those two words, the space where questions outnumber answers, where justice is not a fact but a pursuit, where one night in 1991 still casts a shadow long enough to touch everyone who walks through that alley without knowing why it feels different under their feet. The story doesn't end here because it can't. It simply stops at the last thing we know for sure. Hannah Price left work on a rainy October night in Seattle and never made it home. Everything after that is missing. And until someone, somewhere, fills in that missing part, not with rumor, not with headlines, but with the full, unbroken truth, the Harbor Line case will stay exactly what it has always been behind the noise, not solved, just waiting. By the time you hear a story like this, it's already been told 100 different ways, in police reports, in court transcripts, in hurried news hits and padded-out documentaries, in late-night radio shows and half-remembered bar conversations where someone leans in and says, "Did you ever hear about that girl who disappeared by the diner?" Every version trims something away. Every version adds something that wasn't there. And now there's this one, a voice in your ear, a screen in your hand, a progress bar creeping across the bottom as you let the rain of another city, another year, pour into whatever room you're sitting in. Somewhere right now, a red recording light glows in a small home studio, foam panels on the walls, a cheap mic upgraded 3 times, a script pulled up on a laptop, paragraphs highlighted, breaths marked in the margins. The person behind the mic inhales, exhales, and reads the line on the screen. Seattle, 1991, cold case solved. The headline that lied. They let the words hang for a beat, exactly as long as the editor will later need for dramatic effect. Then they keep going, their voice threading through everything you've just heard. The diner, the alley, the backpack, the shoe, the photo in the sneaker, the fingerprint, the trial, the verdict, the waiting. They're not making it up. They're stitching it together. Turning a 30-year wound into 40 minutes of story a stranger can consume between dinner and sleep. But outside that recording booth, nothing has changed. In the basement of the precinct, the evidence room hums with fluorescent lights and tired refrigeration units. The Harbor Line box sits in its slot, one of many, indistinguishable at a glance. Cardboard, tape, a name. If you pulled your camera out here, if you framed the shot just right, added a slow zoom and a low, unsettling tone, you could make this shelf look like the heart of the story. It isn't. It's just where the pieces wait. A clerk moves down the aisle with a cart, checking labels, retrieving boxes for other detectives. He pauses for a second at Price, Hannah, not because he knows the case, but because he's seen it on the news, heard her name in YouTube thumbnails while he scrolled past on his lunch break. He doesn't touch the box. He doesn't need to. The system hasn't requested it today. He keeps walking. That's how most people move past unsolved cases. Not with malice, not with indifference, just with momentum. There's work to do, bills to pay, kids to pick up, time to fill. The abyss between cold and solved is somebody else's problem. Upstairs, in a corner of the cold case office, Ortiz has traded tonight's stack of old files for a different glow, the harsh white of a database search. Her eyes burn, her shoulders ache. The clock on her monitor says she should have gone home hours ago. Instead, she's watching lines of numbers crawl past as the new cross-referencing program chews on ancient call logs. It flags the familiar repair shop number again, the one tied to the maybe mechanic, the maybe connection, the maybe that's been living rent-free in the back of her head since she spotted it the first time. The software adds nothing new, just confirms what she already knows, that in the weeks before she vanished, Hannah made or received several calls that were never fully explained. Ortiz leans back and closes her eyes. She imagines a 19-year-old sitting at the diner phone on her break, one hand twisting the cord, voice low, asking someone on the other end if they're sure about the car, if they're sure it's safe, if they're sure they're not asking too much. She imagines the other voice, older, patient, reassuring, the kind of voice people trust because it sounds like it's heard a lot, seen a lot, knows the shortcuts. None of that is in the file, none of it is evidence. It's just her mind trying to color in the blank spaces with something that feels plausible. She opens her eyes again and kills the thought before it can harden into belief. Belief is how investigators get hurt. Belief is how they miss things. So she goes back to what she can prove. Dates, times, addresses, names that appear more than once. She writes one of them on a sticky note and slaps it to the edge of her monitor. Not Keller, not Tyler, not the delivery driver, someone else. A name that has been in the file for years, mentioned twice, never followed beyond a single line. She doesn't even know yet if it matters. But it's there, faint, like a smudge on glass. It might be nothing. Or it might be the smallest edge of something that, pulled carefully, reveals more. That's the thing about truly cold cases. They don't end with an arrest or a verdict. They end in tiny decisions. A detective deciding, on a Tuesday night, to type one more name into one more search field. A clerk deciding not to throw out an old box during an inventory purge. A witness deciding, after 30 years of silence, to answer when an unknown number buzzes their phone. On the other side of the city, a man sits alone in his garage, the air thick with the smell of oil and metal. His hands are scarred, his joints stiff, his hair thinner than it used to be. He's not Keller. He's not anyone whose name ever made it to a lower third graphic. He's nobody, if you ask the world. A man who used to work at a place that used to subcontract for a repair shop, that used to get calls from a girl who wanted a cheap car. He knows her name. He remembered it when the first documentary came out. He remembers it now, every time the rain slants at a particular angle against the garage door. He remembers a face, not clearly, not like a photograph, but like the impression a face leaves when you've looked at it a handful of times, always in motion, always framed by fluorescent light and steam from a dish pit. Did he see her talk to someone that last week? Did he see a car pull up near closing time? Did he see a man at the counter watching her with a little too much focus? He doesn't know anymore. Memory bows under the weight of what-ifs. Every scenario he runs in his head comes with its own guilt. If he did see something and forgot, he's failed. If he didn't see anything and tells himself he might have, he's lying. Either way, he is tempted, more nights than he'd admit, to pick up the phone, dial the cold case line and say, "I'm not sure this is anything," but he never does. He tells himself it's because it's been too long, because the cops have better things to do, because nobody wants another shaky recollection muddying the waters. The truth is simpler and uglier. He's afraid that if he steps into the story now, 3 decades late, he'll never get back out. That his life, small and quiet and mostly unremarkable, will be swallowed up by that one night in a city alley he barely remembers walking past. He turns up the radio instead, lets the announcer's voice drown out his own. Back at your screen, the progress bar keeps moving. The voice you're hearing leans into the final stretch, dropping names and years and phrases that were once breaking news. Cold case. Mysterious disappearance. Shocks community. You've heard them all before. They slide off easily now. Background noise. Another haunting story in a world full of them. But somewhere between those words, details stick. The white sneaker, the photo cut at the throat, the box that was lost for 3 days in evidence storage, the partial print that might mean everything or might mean nothing. They lodge in your mind like small, sharp stones. You'll carry them around for a while, maybe just for tonight, maybe for longer, maybe the next time you're walking home alone and decide, without fully knowing why, to stay on the main street instead of cutting down the side path you usually take. You might not remember Hannah's name in that moment. You might only remember a feeling. That's her shadow, whether you realize it or not. The voice in the recording booth keeps going, guiding you toward the end, toward whatever version of closure this format is capable of giving. You'll get a final line. A last resonant sentence designed to play over the outro music and sit with you just long enough to make you click subscribe. But the story itself doesn't know you've reached the end. Tomorrow, Ortiz will come back to her desk. She'll open the Harbor Line file again, or she won't. She'll chase a different case for a few weeks, or she'll get pulled into meetings about budget cuts and resource allocation. Somewhere in that shuffle, she'll catch sight of the sticky note with the half-forgotten name and think, I should run that down when I get a minute. Maybe she will, maybe she won't. Tomorrow, Lauren will wake up and decide whether or not to check her email for any message from a stranger claiming to know something. She gets them sometimes. People who say they grew up in the neighborhood, people who dated someone who might have been involved, people who insist that they have a theory. Most want attention. A few might want to help. The trouble is telling which is which without tearing herself open every time she might watch another video about her sister. She might avoid them all. She might step outside, feel the wet air on her face, and think, just for a second, that it smells like 1991 again. Tomorrow, the man in the garage might pick up the phone. Or he might not. And you, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, however much of this you've let under your skin, you might close this app and move on. You might forget the specific alley, the specific city, the specific girl, and her specific name. Or you might not. You might find yourself months from now hearing about an old case cracked by a new lead and think, they did it again. They pulled something out of the dark. Maybe one day that headline will be about Hannah. Maybe one day Ortiz or the detective who comes after her will stand in front of a camera reading from a prepared statement that says, through new information and corroborating evidence, we are now able to conclusively determine what happened to Hannah Price on the night of October 19th, 1991. Maybe the word solved will flash again, this time without an asterisk, or maybe not. Maybe this is all there will ever be. A girl who left work and didn't arrive where she was supposed to. A family who never stopped asking why. A city that absorbed the story into its bones without ever fully understanding it. And a box on a shelf that refuses to be anything but heavy. What you've heard is everything we can say out loud. What remains is everything we don't know. Everything after that last confirmed sighting exists in a kind of suspended time, a fog of could have and might have and almost. It's tempting, sitting where you are, safe in the present, to fill that fog with certainty. To pick a suspect, to decide that the jury was wrong or right or blind or brave, to close the file in your mind because leaving it open is uncomfortable. But if this story is honest, it can't let you do that. It has to leave you where it leaves the detectives, the family, the city itself. Standing at the mouth of an alley on a wet Seattle night, staring into the dark, knowing for a fact that someone walked in and never walked out, and having to live with the reality that not knowing is not a temporary state. Sometimes it's the whole story. So when the voice in your ear finally falls silent, when the credits roll and the outro music fades and the video ends, remember this. The case file says cold. The headline once said solved. But somewhere in the space between those two words, a phone is still waiting to ring, a detective is still ready to pick it up, and a name, Hannah Price, is still written on the front of a box that will not, no matter how much the world tries to move on, close itself. The recording stops. The red light clicks off. The story, unfinished, keeps going without you. Some nights the city feels like it's trying to tell on itself. Streetlights stutter. Old pipes groan behind apartment walls. A garbage truck hisses down a side street at 3:17 a.m., metal teeth chewing through bags that used to be someone's secrets. If you're awake for it, if you're listening, the whole place sounds guilty. Tonight is one of those nights. On a narrow street not far from the old Harbor Line block, a laundromat hums under harsh fluorescent light. Inside, machines spin clothes in tight circles, glass doors fogged with heat and detergent. A woman in a navy sweatshirt sits in a plastic chair, legs crossed, eyes on the screen of her phone. White noise, white light, white walls. She scrolls past a headline without meaning to. Seattle 1991 cold case solved. Shocking twists, dark secrets. She doesn't tap it. She doesn't need to. She's seen enough of those. Different faces, different cities. Same template, same words. Stories packaged for people who want to dip their hands in someone else's tragedy and pull them back out clean. Her name is nobody the Harbor Line file cares about. But the man folding towels at the back of the laundromat, he matters, not in the way you might think. Not because he's the killer, not because he knows everything, not because he's been carrying a confession in his throat for 30 years. That would be too neat, too cinematic, too exactly what you've been trained to expect. He matters because of one small, stupid, ordinary thing. He was in the Harbor Line diner 2 nights before Hannah disappeared. He was at the counter. He ordered coffee. He watched the rain. He saw a man sit 3 stools down, order nothing, and stare at the reflection in the window instead of the waitress taking her apron off after shift. He noticed the way the man's eyes slid to her hands when she counted her tips. He noticed the way she avoided his gaze, just enough to be polite, not enough to be inviting. He noticed the man leave, exactly 30 seconds after she did, as if he'd been waiting for that. He saw it. He clocked it. He forgot it. It did not burn itself into his memory. It did not send a jolt of warning through his spine. It was just one more moment in a week full of thousands of moments. By the time he walked home that night, he was thinking about late rent and a sore knee and a leak in his bathroom ceiling. When the news broke that a girl from the Harbor Line had gone missing, he thought awful and kept moving. When the sketch hit the airwaves, he thought, kind of looks like that guy at the counter, and then, no, not really, and changed the channel. When the tip line number flashed on the screen, he didn't write it down. Someone else would call, he told himself. Someone closer. Someone who'd seen something that mattered. And so, the thing he might have said back then never made it into the file. No note, no statement, no scribbled line in the margins. Just a living, breathing person walking around the city for 3 decades with one shard of memory lodged somewhere too shallow to feel and too deep to notice. Until now. The washing machine buzzes. He pulls his thoughts back from wherever they've drifted, stands, and starts transferring wet clothes into the yawning mouth of the dryer. A sock drops. He bends to grab it. His back twinges. He mutters under his breath, a small curse meant for gravity and time. The woman in the navy sweatshirt laughs softly at something on her phone. A video, a story, a voice. A thumbnail flashes past, a familiar alley, shot at night, rain falling in slow motion. The video title reads, "The Harbor Line Ghost, the case that was never really solved." She pauses this time. Curiosity is a reflex. She taps. Headphones in, volume up. A narrator's voice pours into her ears, low and smooth and ominous. Names, dates, images. Somewhere between transferring towels and feeding quarters into the dryer, the man hears it. Not the words, just the tone. That particular cadence that every true crime piece uses, the one that says, "Something terrible happened here and I'm going to guide you through it." He recognizes it. He's heard it before. For reasons he couldn't fully explain if you asked him, his chest tightens. He glances at the woman's phone screen as he walks past, sees the alley, sees the diner logo in an old grainy shot, sees the name Hannah Price appear in white letters at the bottom. Something in his mind jolts like a projector jammed for 3 decades coughing back to life. The counter, the coffee, the girl untying her apron, the man 3 stools down who never touched his drink. The timing. He stops walking. For a second he just stands there. Hoodie damp from the mist he brought in with him, hands empty. The dryers hum. The woman's earbuds leak a thread of muffled narration. The lights buzz. He could ignore it. He could tell himself it's nothing. That too much time has passed. That his brain is rewriting history to make him feel more important than he is. That thousands of men have sat in thousands of diners and stared at windows instead of people. That he's being dramatic. He almost does. He almost turns, picks up a gossip magazine from the plastic table, sits, waits for his clothes to dry, and goes home. Instead, he walks over to the bulletin board by the door. It's covered in the usual detritus of city life. Babysitting offers, guitar lessons, a lost cat, a flyer for a local band, and one printed page the laundromat owner had tacked up months ago after a community meeting. Cold case tip line, Seattle PD. If you have information, no matter how small, about an unsolved crime, call... There's a number at the bottom. He stares at it. His heart is beating too fast. That annoys him. He's not suspicious. He's not involved. He's not guilty of anything except being young once and tired once and inattentive once. But guilt doesn't always need a reason. Sometimes it just shows up, sits on your chest, and asks why you didn't do more when you had the chance. He takes out his phone. He opens the dial screen. His thumb hovers. What can he possibly say? That 3 decades ago he saw a man look at a girl in a way he didn't like? That a YouTube video in a laundromat made him think of it? That he might be wrong? That he might be right? That he doesn't even know if he's remembering the same night anymore or just stitching together story and reality until they blur? He could hang up before it rings. He could close the app. He could walk away. He doesn't. He dials. In the cold case office, an old phone on a side desk lights up and vibrates against wood. Ortiz, halfway through packing her bag for the night, glances over, half annoyed, half trained. Calls at this hour are usually nothing. Wrong numbers, drunks, people who want to talk more than they want to help. She considers letting it go to voicemail. She doesn't. She picks up. Cold case unit, this is Detective Ortiz. There's a pause. Background hum. Laundry machines, though she doesn't know that yet. Then a voice. Yeah. I don't know if this is anything. It's probably nothing. It's stupid, actually. But I was just listening to something about that Harbor Line case, the waitress from 91, and I remembered something. Maybe, I think. She sits back down without meaning to. Her bag drops onto the floor with a soft thud. Okay, she says. Take your time. He talks, halting at first, apologetic. He keeps undercutting himself, calling it a little thing. Probably just my brain. Too late to matter. She doesn't push. She doesn't reassure him that every detail is important, even though that's what the pamphlets say. She just listens. He describes the diner, the counter, the booths, the way the rain looked on the window, the girl, the man, the distance between them, the way the man left. He stops twice as if expecting her to interrupt, to tell him they've heard it all before. She doesn't. The details he gives are thin, wisps, nothing you can print, nothing you can charge on. But a few of them snag on threads she already knows. The time of night. The direction the man went when he stepped out, the way he didn't leave a tip because he never ordered. When he's done, he laughs, embarrassed. Like I said, he mutters, probably nothing. It might be, she says. It also might not. He hesitates. Did I screw up back then? He asks suddenly. By not calling? By not saying anything? Is this... His voice cracks on the next words. Is this my fault a little? She could tell him no. She could tell him yes. She could unload 3 decades of forensic theory and investigative philosophy onto his shoulders. She doesn't. It's not about what you didn't do then, she says. It's about what you're doing now. Silence on the line. Then a soft, shaky exhale. So, what do I do? He asks. Let me write down your name, she says. Your number. I might want to talk to you again. And if you remember anything else, anything at all, you call this line, okay? You call it even if you think it's stupid, even if it's 2 a.m. You don't decide for us what's nothing. Deal? Deal, he says. She gets his info, thanks him, hangs up. For a moment, she just sits there, staring at the phone, the room dim except for her desk lamp. The building feels hollow. The city feels too large. The case file, closed in front of her, feels heavier than usual, as if it knows something has shifted, even if that shift is less than a centimeter. A man in a laundromat decided not to ignore a feeling. That's all that's happened. Nothing concrete, nothing explosive, no confession, no bloody souvenir pulled from an attic trunk, just a single wavering voice added to a 30-year chorus. But sometimes that's how things start, not with sirens, with a dial tone. Outside, the rain keeps falling. It always does, on parked cars and glass towers and slick alleys, on bus stops and diner windows and laundromat awnings, on people who were there and people who weren't born yet and people who will someday walk the same routes without knowing whose footprints they're stepping into. You might want me to tell you that this phone call is the key, that Ortiz will crack the case wide open because of this one memory, that a new board will go up, new lines will be drawn, a new name will land at the center and stay there until someone is led, handcuffed through a tunnel of cameras. You might be waiting for that. You might feel like you've earned it. But this isn't that kind of story. This is the kind where the truth doesn't arrive on cue, where leads pile up in uneven stacks, where every promising thread can end in another tangle, another snag, another dead end, where a call from a laundromat is one more fragile piece in a puzzle that might never be complete. What matters isn't whether this is the call. What matters is that the line is still open. That somewhere in that narrow space between cold and solved, people are still talking, still remembering, still doubting themselves and dialing anyway. That the file isn't just paper and photos and maps, but a living accumulation of choices, made, unmade, delayed, regretted. The man leaves the laundromat with a warm bundle of clothes and a heart that feels both lighter and heavier at the same time. He tells himself the detective will probably decide it's nothing. He tells himself he did what he could. He tells himself it's over. But as he walks home, every alley looks different, every bus stop, every lone figure under a street lamp. He has joined a very specific club now, the unofficial, unwilling community of people attached to a cold case. People who made a choice or didn't, and then had to live inside that decision for the rest of their lives. He may never hear from Ortiz again. He may get a call next week. He may be asked to look at old photos, old lineups, old maps, or his information may sit in a notes column, cross-referenced with others, waiting its turn to matter. On the other end of the city, Lauren's phone buzzes. Unknown number. She hesitates. Answers. Hears Ortiz's voice. Hears the words she's learned to brace for. Nothing big yet, just a new tip. I wanted you to know we're still getting calls. It's not hope exactly that she feels. Hope is too bright, too sharp. This is something duller, but steadier. Endurance. As long as someone new is still dialing, the story isn't finished. As long as a detective is still picking up, the alley isn't just a backdrop, the headline isn't the last word, the file isn't just a box on a shelf. You, listening to this, watching this, reading this, are part of that, whether you meant to be or not. Because every time you consume a story like this and don't let it slip away completely, every time you remember a name instead of reducing it to a case number, every time you resist the easy comfort of the word solved when it doesn't fit, you tilt the balance a fraction of a degree. Not much, but enough. Enough that when the next person in the next laundromat in the next city sees a number on a bulletin board and feels their pulse jump, they might think of all the times they've heard that line. If you know something, say something, and realize it isn't just background noise. It's an invitation, a responsibility, a thread. In Seattle, in 1991, a girl walked out of a diner into the rain and never reached the bus stop. In 2025, a man finally dialed a number he should have written down decades ago. Between those two moments, lives. A case file that says cold, a headline that once said solved, and a story that refuses, stubbornly, to end just because we are tired of not knowing.